You have just booted up the Switch 2 Ludiclore cast. Time capsule 2. A whirlwind of Switch 2 launch month. Discussions. Parenthetical soliloquy. 1.
It's my podcast and I'll talk if I want to. Talk if I want to. Talk if I want to. You would talk to if you had a Switch 2.
I'm Nick, the Nintendo Nutcase.
And I'm breaking all the rules today, including the rule where I can't start a podcast by singing a song where I rhyme the word "to" with the word "to" from the Switch 2. You dig? Well, whether you dig or not, we will be digging together to this no-holds-bar, no-rules podcast. Listen, I'm not your papa. And listen, Mira's not your mama. And listen, neither of us are the popo. So there really are no rules. You want to load up on a triple-decker sundae with lots and lots of toppings and syrup right before bed while listening to this very episode? No rules. You want to put a kinky spiked choke collar on your neck and slather honey all over your chest while you roll around in a pile of dirt while listening to this episode? No rules. You want to walk into a 7-Eleven,
Accost the poor employee behind the cash register, crack open said register, steal all the money, get a whole $711.11, walk on out to the sidewalk and get popped, booked by the law, taken into custody, and then sentenced to 5 to 10 years of hard time?
You didn't hear it here, folks, but no rules.
Am I following a rule if I break into the traditional intro, or is that just adhering to a beloved, respected tradition? I guess we're about to find out. You ready? You set?
So it's funny then, since there are really no rules, why I was beholding my very self to a rule. A rule that today on this very episode will be broken, shattered, destroyed, trampled on, maybe even voided out of existence. And here's the rule. When I started this show, all the way back when our first episode launched in April of 2025, a scant 3 months ago, I had this vision. I was a man with a dream, and part of this dream told me, you know what, Mr. Nutcase? You know, my dreams are very respectful when they address me, as I hope all of your dreams are to you as well. Mr. Nutcase, there are a lot of podcasts with a middle-aged white man from your country who like to share opinions about video games on the internet. And Mr. Nutcase, boy, we shouldn't follow that same road. We know where that road leads. That road leads to mediocrity, following the pack, and getting sucked down in a never-ending rat race where everybody tries to outdo themselves even though they're really saying the same thing in only a slightly different way. Mr. Nutcase, we must be better than that! And so far, I think we have been better than that. I'm a little saucy this morning, if you can't tell. Maybe I should have some more coffee to perk me up a little bit more, give me even more of that energy boost. Let's see. Now that's a mediocre cup of drip coffee bought with pre-ground beans from Walmart. Delicious. That was my rule going into this. We have to be different. We have to be better. We have to find our own path. And thankfully, Due to my amazing wife and her unique perspective on both the world and video games, and the unique way she expresses herself, she has given us that flavor. That flavor you can't get anywhere else. But herein lies a bit of the problem. I am a hardcore gamer. My wife, a casual gamer. And we are hard at work on the final Mario Kart episode, where we will be talking about both Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Mario Kart World. But I'm kind of tired of talking about Mario Kart and only Mario Kart. But I can't do shows without the newcomer. That betrays the very spirit of this podcast. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's right. It's my podcast and my wife's, obviously. I've talked to her about this. I'm not doing this off the grid. No sleeping in the doghouse for the Nutcase tonight. Well, we decided this rule can be broken because it's our podcast. There are rules, and now there are no rules. Because I've done a ton with the Switch 2. I have played a lot of games. I have used a lot of features. I have formed a lot of thoughts. However, my wife has mainly only played Mario Kart with me, which has been super fun. She's had a great time. I'm very excited to hear her take on Mario Kart 8 versus World, now that she has spent considerable time with the new one. But she can't talk about SouCalibur II.
Okay, she isn't going to be chucking 30 hours of her life into Rune Factory, right?
So my choices are, well, I can't talk about it with her, so I guess I won't talk about it at all, because that's the rule, right? Right, folks? That's the rule. The Nutcase can't talk about things without his wife. That's the rule. No, wait, that's right. No rules. It's a soliloquy. Soliloquy 1, the Nutcase without the newcomer, because this is the only way I will get to talk about this stuff, and I have some stuff to talk about. You want to bail on this episode? I see how it is. Okay, sure. You're only here for the newcomer? I get it. Okay. Welcome to the past several years of my life where I hear that from everyone else in my family, too. Huh? Where's Mira? Is Mira with you today? Oh, I can't wait to see Mira. Oh, both of you are here visiting us? Oh, hi, Mira. Oh, it's so good to see you, Mira. Oh, hey, Nick. Oh, you're here too? Oh, glad you brought your wife. Yeah, I know. She's cool. Okay, I get it. But right now, it's just me and you. And we're going to have a gosh dang good time regardless. It's a longer preamble than normal, but again, no rules. How about a little format shift? I have a handful of games I want to talk about. I have a handful of Switch 2 hardware things I want to talk about. And I have a handful of experieyi I want to talk about. And instead of going in order, here's the game section, here's the hardware section, here's the experieyi section, we're going to be flipping back and forth, this way, that way, zigging, zagging, serpentining. You ain't going to know which way we're going, where we're coming from, what hit you, what's coming up next. It's going to be exciting. So let's kick it off with the first thing I want to talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 in our first Switch 2 Ludic Lore podcast of the Switch 2 era. We're kicking it off with Super Mario Odyssey. Woo-hoo! That's right. We're starting on just about the highest note you can start on. 2017's seminal, timeless, classic masterpiece, Super Mario Odyssey, now upgraded for the Nintendo Switch 2. That Donkey Kong Bonanza Direct sure got me feeling a certain type of way. A type of way that can only be satiated by playing what we all now assume is going to be the sequel to Donkey Kong Bonanza's prequel, Super Mario Odyssey. So it's been a real pleasure to revisit it on the Switch 2, looking sharp, looking crisp, looking clean. Mario has never looked hotter. Yowza, Papa likey. And Papa likey way more than just that, but in order to keep things a little bit expedited, considering this is a 8-year-old game, I'm just going to run through 5, count them 5, things that I still love about Super Mario Odyssey! Woohoo! The first thing, the thing that keeps me coming back time and time again, that hot, fresh movement tech. You know, some actions in some games just feel so DAMN good. No matter how many times you do them, there's so much room for expressive creativity and kinetic energy with Super Mario Odyssey's movement tech. I'm talking, of course, about the long jump, into the Cappy throw, into the dive, off of Cappy, jumping up again, throwing Cappy one more time, diving towards him once more, and falling down back to the ground where you chain it into a roll before rolling right back into another long jump, Cappy throw, bounce off of Cappy from a dive into another jump, Cappy throw, jump, dive, roll, jump, dive, long jump, Cappy throw, roll, jump, dive. On it goes. Of course, there's also the triple jump, the side somersault, the backward somersault, the ground pound, where if you press the jump button as soon as your booty hits the bottom of the ground and you press the jump button, you'll spring right back up with extra height, which you can then go into a wall jump and a Cappy throw and a jump off of that, into that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and this and this and that. On it goes. There are so many shortcuts you can take. It is so fun to replay this game, especially when you are not going for 999, which I've done twice. All 999 moons. Not too shabby, that's for sure. But when you're not focused on exploring every little nook and cranny, and you're just trying to get from one place to another, for example, following just the main critical path, boy oh boy, you really cannot do much better in terms of pure pleasure of expressive, fun movement that lets you break these levels down into any which way you want. You can't do much better than Super Mario Odyssey. That's the first thing. The second thing, the Brutals. They get a lot of hate. So why am I loving on the Brutals? The Brutals, of course, are the rabbit-like mini-boss enemies. And by rabbit-like, I mean actual rabbits, and by mini-boss, I mean actual boss. Okay, of course, nomenclature semantics, what you gonna do? Well, I'll tell you what Nintendo Treehouse is gonna do. They're gonna take this group of rabbits, and they're going to come up with a pun that is 4 layers deep. The first layer, brood, a brood of rabbits. You know, because it's a group of rabbits. Brutal, because, well, they're brutal. They're fighting, they're nasty, they're violent, they're dangerous. Layer the third, brood, they're brooding, they're moody, they're temperamental, they're emotionally volatile, especially when joined with Bowser's nefarious scheme to marry Princess Peach against her will. Ooh, what a dark theme for a Nintendo game. And of course, they are part of a bridal party. Bridal, brutal, brutal, brooding, brutal brood of rabbits, brood. Next thing you're going to tell me is they're used in the brewing of Mushroom Kingdom's finest craft brewed beer. Yuck. Is that a hair in my cup? Thought rabbits were supposed to be lucky, but this feels like one unlucky cup of beer, if you know what I mean. And what I mean is, I don't like drinking things with hairs in it, from humans, rabbits, or otherwise. Whew. Moving on! The third of the 5 things, of the many things that I could choose from, but of these particular 5, the way it leans into how much of a video game it is, and not just any video game, a Mario video game that has decades of beloved classic history to draw upon, and I'm talking about those 8-bit sections. This Link Between Worlds-esque mechanic where you go into a warp pipe and then you're flat inside of a wall or surface, but here you are 8-bit Mario, and the music of the level remains the same song, but the composition goes all 8-bit chiptune on you as well. And to really tie in the old and the new, if you're wearing one of these fun little costumes that you can put on your little baby boy Mario in the game Super Mario Odyssey, he will retain those costumes in an 8-bit pixelated format in these 8-bit sections. Beautiful, wonderful, lovely, full, all of the full, makes my heart full, makes my hands full with lots of button presses on the controller because I just don't want to put this game down. Those were the first 3 things. Okay, bingo, bango, boom. Last 2 I'm going to reserve for my 2 favorite levels, my favorite kingdoms, if you will, and this is not counting the post-game kingdom after you beat the final boss / final ending sequence. Of course, that hits me right in the nostalgia, so that has an unfair advantage that I'm not even going to quantify here. Bowser's Castle. This level blew me away the first time I played it because, I love fresh takes on things. I love colorful things. I love feudal Japan. So for Bowser's Castle to be a fresh take by having it be a feudal Japanese castle with a setting that is this atmospheric night sky with a full moon and then swirling mists of green and red clouds, but not green and red in a way that looks like it's celebrating Christmas, looks gorgeous. It's so visually striking. And you combine that with the song that plays, which for my money is the best song in the game, maybe excluding Jump Up Superstar. I'll put it this way, it is my favorite song by far in terms of just a normal track that plays during a level. I would call it the Dire Dire Docks of Super Mario Odyssey. It doesn't quite hit the heights of Dire Dire Docks, but then again, what does? I'll tell you what, nothing. Nothing. Except maybe Forest Interlude from Donkey Kong Country 2. Lower Brinstar parenthetical Red Soil from Metroid. Okay, there are some songs that are way up there with Dire Dire Docks. But I love the atmospheric stuff, the ambiance, the vibes, which all three of those tracks that I mentioned, Dire Dire Docks, Forest Interlude, Brinstar Depths, parentheses, Red Soil, and now the theme from Bowser's Castle in Super Mario Odyssey joins that illustrious group of incredible video game tracks that really just get my goose a-going every time I hear it, specifically the part that plays during the first half of the castle level. The music shifts as you're approaching Bowser himself, and that track, also very good, but has nothing compared on the lilting flute and melancholic grandeur of the opening song that plays during the first 3/4 of the level. Bowser's Castle. I would want to live there if it weren't run by someone who was such a prickly porpoise, if you know what I mean. Porpoises are turtles, right? No, that's tortoise. Porpoise is a sea mammal? Well, this serves no porpoise, because I'm going to go to my final level and my final thing. And of course, this is the thing that's going to tie it all together to Bonanza. We hope, we think, we pray, we substrate ourselves against the almighty forces in supplication, just begging for a glimpse of a tie-in between Donkey Kong Bonanza and the Donk. The new Donk. The new Donk City. What's the old Donk? We going to be tearing down the old Donk to build up the new Donk? Is Cranky Kong the old Donk? Is Donkey Kong the third, i.e. normal Donkey Kong we all know and love, is he the new Donk? But in Odyssey, here we are. We're in the new Donk, and New Donk is just one city, theoretically, amongst presumably many cities in the Metro Kingdom. The implications of New Donk City relative to the rest of the Metro Kingdom will echo and reverberate throughout the annals of history. The annals? Throughout the channels, throughout the History Channel. Tune in Saturday at 7/6 Pacific for the ancient archaeological show, Digging Up Donk. We're going to dig up artifacts all throughout New Donk's history. And we're going to discover why, okay? Why are all of these streets named after different Donkey Kong characters, most of them from Donkey Kong Country? What's up with that? How did that come to be? Hope Bonanza tells us. Why does... Okay, my wife's not on this episode, okay, so I feel safe saying this, but why does Candy Kong have her own cafe? And why'd I go there 4 to 5 times for a brown cup of Mighty Joe Young? Why was I going bananas for Candy's Cafe? Whew! The humans in the Donk. These humans look so weird relative to Mario, because Mario is presumably a human, a 25-year-old human, according to Mario's pappy, Shigeru Miyamoto. But why is he so different than the natives of New Donk, who are very stringy, lanky? Lanky Kong? Is Lanky Kong the progenitor of the New Donk human population? Is that why they all have lanky-esque proportions? This might be a breadcrumb we can follow all the way to the source.
I might have stumbled across something revolutionary here. I'll put that in my back pocket and examine it further before the Donkey Kong Timeline episode. But Lanky's been out of the picture for a while, and maybe Lanky was doing some hanky-panky. What the hell am I talking about? Maybe Lanky did a very innocent, wholesome genetic experiment where his DNA was crossbred with the DNA of a human, and that is what created the Lanky-esque proportions of these new donkers from the new Donk City. Maybe the old donkers were squat and plump, like our boy Mario, but them new donkers are stringy and long, like our boy Lanky. Huh. Well, I've really not gotten to much of what I wanted to say about New Donk City, but for the sake of, I can't say brevity, but for the sake of actually getting to some Switch 2 stuff, we're just going to end talking about the festival. The seminal moment of the game, the culmination of decades of Mario history, the Throwback Festival, where you go into another 8-bit section and you're playing an homage to the original Donkey Kong arcade game, and there are fireworks going off in the background, for this is indeed the festival, the New Donk City Festival, and this is naturally when the game's cornerstone musical showpiece happens, a live performance from Mayor Pauline and her band of Jump Up Superstar, one of the best songs Nintendo has ever made. Such an incredible song. Such a wonderful concoctions of emotions. And the way Pauline turns one of her original sprite animations from the original Donkey Kong, where she's facing sideways because that's how the pixels faced back in those days, and she kicks her little legs back and forth because she's squirming to try to get away from Big Bad Donkey. The way that has been recontextualized and reclaimed as a cool little Charleston kick dance back and forth during that part of the song. Great, wonderful, exceptional, especially since that part of the song is a remix of the music from the arcade game. Wow. These Super Mario Odyssey developers, they might be pretty good at their jobs. They also might be making a prequel to Mario Odyssey called Donkey Kong Bonanza. And it might be less than 1 month away. And it also might be time to move on, because from the heights of Super Mario Odyssey, we're going to plummet to the depths of something I'm a big enough man to admit I was wrong about, because there were multiple flashpoints, hot button issues about the Switch 2 pre-launch. 2 of them in particular I took a very hard stance on of, no, this is good actually. No, this will actually be cool, you fools, you cretins, you Peasley peasants with brains the size of peas and brains the quality of pheasants. I had trust in this game. I had faith in this game. And of course, I'm talking about Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which for me gets a 4.5 out of 10. That might sound glib, but it's the God's honest truth. I do rate every game that I play on a 10-point scale with 0.5 increments. So I have 20 entire numbers to choose from 0 all the way to 10, every 0.5 in between. And I like to use the full scale, okay? So 4.5, that's certainly not illustrious, certainly not desirable. However, this game did have to claw and scrape its way to earning all 4.5 points from yours truly. But I was so convinced, I was so sold on this concept ahead of time. And after playing it, the closest comparison I can make is that it feels like going to a day-long retreat in a summer school class where the day is spent going to a museum on a field trip with a $10 ticket fee. And when you're at the museum, okay, well, field trips are fun, right? Museums can be fun, especially if it's a interactive museum, or sometimes these children museums, as they are called, will have very fun exhibits for the children to interact with. This has a little of that, but more than not, it's an exercise in intellectual stimuli, where the stimuli is so unstimulating that I might as well just be taking a nap in the back of the classroom instead. So let's get into it. You start this game. In media res,
You are already in the thick of the action because you start this game waiting in a line. Wow. How did your character end up there? What crazy events earlier in the day led them to this very point in time and space? I mean, you got to fill in that backstory for yourself. Here's what I like to think. The headcanon for my character in Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Here's what I think. I think this character got out of bed in the morning, okay, poured himself a bowl of Cheerios, sprinkled a little bit of sugar on top, splashed it up with that sweet, sweet milk, ate that bowl of cereal, okay, put on some pants, put on a shirt, because, of course, this character, for psychological reasons that would take even more headcanon to flesh out, well, this character eats in his skivvies. He was eating these Cheerios in his boxers. So he dons his pants and shirt and shoes after he eats. He walks outside. He hops on the bus, okay? And this character, being the city rat that he is, he has a bus pass. He doesn't have to pay any extra money because he's already paid for the month. He swipes that card. The bus is not too full, but it's not too empty. It's a summer school day. It's a weekday. It's probably, this game gives me the vibes of a Wednesday. It's the dog days of summer. But you're not going to be sitting in a stuffy classroom today. Nope. You are going to the hot, new Nintendo Switch 2 museum. A museum that is built to be an oversized Switch 2 that you can run on top of, inside of, throughout. That's kind of cool, right? Okay, he gets off the bus. He walks up to the line of the museum where he meets his fellow classmates, perhaps a teacher. I didn't see any chaperones, okay? I didn't see my professor in line here. Is he out back hitting the flask again because the home life ain't so good? Some trouble in the marriage, maybe? Pawns the kids off onto this museum field trip tour, takes a few hours for himself to drown away his sorrows on this Wednesday morning before sobering up a little by the end of the trip so he can keep it together just enough to escort the children back to the bus so they can get home safely. I don't know. But all of this stuff that I just said, this lore, this headcanon for Switch 2 Welcome Tour, I kind of had a better time talking about this off the cuff just now than I did playing the game. So I guess I shouldn't keep putting it off any longer. Here's what you do. You start off in this big line of people waiting, clamoring to get in. These people that are very amorphously shaped, they're very abstracted, little humanoid figures with very generic, nondescript features. And you scroll your cursor. The very first gameplay action you do, you scroll your cursor across all these different people. And you choose who your avatar will be. Which character standing in line will you inhabit the shoes of? Lots of people there, lots of lives to lead. Of course, I chose the guy who ate Cheerios in his boxers that morning. You click your character and you're on your way. You're in. The museum is now open. And you're going to start off on that left Joy-Con. And you're going to go to the information desk, okay? And you're going to be given a map. And the map will be the only UI element you have to interact with outside of the things you're interacting with in the museum. So you cannot press plus to bring up a pause menu. You cannot press minus to bring up some sort of menu. You cannot press any button to do anything in this game when you're not directly in front of something in the museum to interact with, unless you're pressing the X button to pull up your map. On this map, there are 5 tabs. The furthest right tab is just a list of the various areas. Starts with Area A, which is the Joy-Con 2, parentheses L for left area. And it goes all the way down from A to L. So you have, how much is that? Well, I'm in summer school. I can count A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. That's the end. I believe that's 12, if my math is right. And if it's not right, what are you going to do? Sue me? So you got these 12 areas, but you go through them sequentially. You have to go through them one at a time. You can't unlock B until you've gone through A. You can't unlock C until you've gone through B. When I say you can't get to the next place until you've gone through them, what I mean is that you have to go and collect various stamps from each location before you can move on. And you have to hit every stamp in the area until the next one opens up. And these stamps are invisible. There will be an invisible stamp stand in front of each various component of the Switch 2. So on the left Joy-Con, well, the very first stamp, at least as it's listed on the map, is the L button. So you walk up to the top of that left Joy-Con, you walk to a specific point, and if you walk in the right spot, a little exclamation point will pop up. You press A, the stamp stand pops up, you get your map stamped, and isn't that exciting? You can go on the hunt for the rest of these component parts of each piece of the Switch 2. You have such exciting stamps to collect on this left Joy-Con. Stamps such as the minus button, the up button, the capture button, the mouse foot parentheses upper, the player LED, the sync button, the mouse foot parentheses lower. So you have to get every single stamp before you can move on to the next section. Which here, Section B, after you get all the stamps in Section A, is the console area itself. The tablet, you're on top of the screen. This part's a little fun because as you're running over the screen, you're kind of skating, right? It's a little slick and your character's slipping around and these pixels will light up on the screen following the character. Okay, that's a visual flourish I like. But the point is, you can't go to the next section until you've gotten all the stamps in the previous section, and there are 100 stamps total throughout all of the sections, okay? 100 stamps total in the game, and a lot of them are pretty obvious, right? If there's a button on the thing you're on, well, of course that button's going to have a stamp, and you just walk around the button until you find the right point to interact with. But you're still just running your character up along these surfaces, trying to find this invisible spot to trigger to press A on. You ever heard the term pixel hunt? Pixel hunt is not fun game design. It's not a fun mechanic. And by the end of the game, okay, you get to some pretty complex parts and pieces. Especially when you're inside some of these things. When you're inside the Joy-Con, when you're inside... Spoiler alert, okay, for the very final area... You go to the Mushroom Kingdom. No, that would be way too cool for this game. The final area, you go inside the Switch 2 tablet. And there are so many circuit boards and bits and bops and wires and what have you. And I just wanted to get all these stamps so I could say I have beaten the game. And at this point, some of these places, it really was me just running along every surface, all of the walls, around all of the edges of every little component part, and just mashing A the whole time, just hoping I trigger this invisible point on the map so I can get my frickin' stamp, which is all the stamp is just a label of the part I'm in front of. The less said about the stamps, the better, so we're going to move right along to the second tab on the map, right? The very final tab. The fifth tab is the list of all the areas I mentioned. The first tab is all of the stamps. We have 3 more tabs in the middle. The second tab, this is one of the 2. There are 2 bright spots in the game, okay? The second tab is my second favorite bright spot in the game. This is the list of all the tech demos. And these are cool. These are the ones that actually show off the unique features of the system. The very first one you're going to run into is called Maracas Physics. And you're going to detach those Joy-Cons. You're going to pop the magnets right off. And you're going to hold the Joy-Cons and shake them like maracas. And they're either going to simulate little beads rolling around or little balls bouncing around inside the Joy-Con as you shake them. And this goes back to the ice cube concept from 1-2 Switch. Everybody 1-2 Switch. No, Everybody 1-2 Switch was the sequel, right? With a Mr. Horace Show Pony. The ice cube demonstration in 1-2 Switch was one of my favorite parts, where you shake the Joy-Con and it feels like you're shaking a cup with ice cubes rattling around. And so nice it is, you can feel how many ice cubes are in it. Okay, so this Maracas Physics tech demo Similar concept, except instead of ice cubes, it's either little beans, a bunch of them rolling around, or bigger balls bouncing around inside the maracas. And it's cool. Another one you're going to run into, Super Mario Bros. 4K, parentheses 1-1. And this is showing you what it's like to have a screen with 4K capabilities and how, if you were to scale down the original Super Mario Bros. To its level of pixels, which is 256 pixels, I don't know. Very low pixel count, certainly not 4,000. And it's this tiny little box on the screen. The entire level, 1-1 from the original Super Mario Bros., fits within this single frame of a 4K screen. And so it's just showing you the relativity of how much more detail there is available on the screen real estate when you have 4,000 pixels to work with, as opposed to whatever the original Super Mario Brothers had. Now, this tech demo honestly was kind of frustrating because on my TV, the level was so small, Mario is so tiny, that I had to use the Switch 2's zoom in feature, which I highly recommend enabling in the system setting options, okay? You just double tap the home screen button when you have this enabled and it will zoom in, and then you can use the X and Y buttons to adjust the level of zoom. So I zoomed in to make it so that the Mario Brothers screen took up most of my screen, kind of defeating the purpose of the whole tech demo where you're supposed to play it in 4K at the original scaling. It's a cool idea for a tech demo. Honestly, though, not one of my favorites, just because it was not very fun because I couldn't see it very well. But alas, these are still pretty cool. I'll just go through one more. One of my other favorites is called HD Rumble 2 Sound. And the Joy-Con 2 do not have speakers inside of them, okay? But by manipulating the rumble, the HD Rumble 2, in certain ways, the Joy-Con can produce tones that sound musical, sound like certain sounds you might be familiar with. There is one part of this tech demo where the rumble stretches out and contorts itself in a way to where it sounds just like what you hear up front every episode of this podcast, the Mario coin sound effect. And that's real neat. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds like Mario collecting a coin. Sounds just like it, actually. But what's that? It's not actually a pre-programmed in sound effect coming through a speaker in an audio chip? It's just the manipulation of the rumble? Very cool. I like that a lot. So you have 14 of these tech demos of various, interest levels. Most of them are over pretty quickly, right? But it's a neat showcase. Then we have the next tab, which is the mini game tab. And there are 20 mini games throughout this whole thing, but a lot of the mini games will have different tiers to them. You play the first version of the mini game, and then you unlock another version of the same mini game, but there's a different twist on it, making it more difficult and challenging. And this is where the stuff gets really kind of grim. Okay, the very first one on that illustrious left Joy-Con 2 is called Dodge the Spiked Balls. And this is a mouse mode game, so you gotta detach the Joy-Con, and your mouse cursor is a spaceship in this mini game, and there are spiked balls falling through the screen, and you have to move your mouse cursor to move the spaceship to dodge the falling spiked balls. And that's it. You just survive for as many seconds as you can. Wow. Whoop-de-doo. The problem with this is it's so rudimentary. I mean, this type of game is something you could play for free on a web browser in 1997. And like I said, it's a spaceship with spiked balls. There is no Nintendo theming to this. Why can't it be Samus's spaceship? And instead of spiked balls falling, it's Metroids falling down the screen. And you have to dodge those. Right? That would make it way more fun. Why isn't it the Star Fox ship, the R-Wing? And you're dodging laser blasts on the screen. That visual flourish, tying it into some Nintendo property, would just go such a long way to giving this game more personality and more enjoyment. But instead, no. It's just this generic spaceship and these generic spiked balls that have nothing to do with anything. How about this one? You ever wanted to get fingerprints all over your new Nintendo Switch 2 screen? Well then, touch 10:4 colors is the solution for you. The whole point they're trying to convey is the Switch 2 screen can register up to 10 different points of touch. I don't know why or how you would ever need that for any sort of gameplay reason, other than their tortured twisting to come up with a concept for this particular minigame. But this will have different colors on the screen, different colored circles, and you have to put your fingers down as these colors pop up. But whenever a new color pops up, you put a new finger down and you cannot pick up a previous finger you have already put on the screen. And you try to contort your hands and fingers to getting all 10 colors pushed so you have all 10 touch points activated. But of course, sometimes you cannot twist your fingers that way because the order of the colors that are coming up appear to be random, and maybe, my ring finger was on red, but it should have been on yellow in order for my pointer finger to contort all the way over to green to press that. It's an idea. It's unique. It's kind of like a twister for the fingers, but it's not fun. And I have no idea what sort of practical application this would ever have for a game. It's cool that it's a touchscreen. We've had touchscreens in Nintendo systems, though, since the DS days, since 2004. Okay, that's 21 years of touchscreens. Not once in the past 2 decades have I ever thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could touch not just 1 point on this screen to manipulate the game, not just 2 points. What if I could touch up to 10 different points on this screen with my 10 little grubby fingers and rub them all over to perform 10 different actions, manipulate 10 different objects at the same time? Now, hey, I'm no game designer, so maybe I'm just not dreaming big enough, but this truly feels like the only use the Switch 2 will ever get out of being able to register 10 different points of touch on the touchscreen is this specific minigame in Switch 2 Welcome Tour. 8 years from now, get back to me. Let me know if any game, just one game, has done anything else that has used the 10 different points of touch registration. It's weird. What a bizarre thing to include in the system. Again, maybe I'm thinking too small. Maybe my brain is the size of a pea because I didn't go to summer school back in the day, and maybe I should have. And maybe if I did, I'd be a big brain developer working at Nintendo right now, coming up with these crazy ideas for games where people want to use grubby little fingers on their new Switch 2 touchscreen, and they want to touch it in 10 different places at the same time, and they want to rub it around to manipulate objects. Maybe I'd be doing that instead of sitting here talking to you about how I don't understand why that's a feature. Here's another good one. Good in sarcasm quotes. Remember how I mentioned the pixel hunt feel of trying to find these invisible spots on the map to get stamps? Well, what if there was an actual mini game called 4K Pixel Hunt: 5 pixels? In this game, you have your 4K screen, and there will be 5 pixels out of all of the pixels possible on your screen, and they will be moving around, and they will be so friggin' infinitesimally tiny, but you will need to move your Joy-Con mouse cursor to click on each of the 5 pixels, and you have to click on them within a certain amount of time to pass. And it's miserable. It's not fun at all. I'm just straining my eyes looking at my 4K screen, and just, is that the tiniest little fleck of movement from a pixel that's a different color, a lighter shade than the rest of the screen? Huh? Is that it? Am I looking at the right thing? Well, guess what? I used the zoom feature again. I zoomed all the way in to find these frickin' tiny pixels in this game that is literally called Pixel Hunt. As if hunting for pixels is a thing anybody wants to do. Again, the idea is to show, wow, 4K. Can you believe how many pixels are in 4K? Hey, you want to see how hard it is to pick out 1 pixel out of all of the pixels available in a 4K screen? Well, you're going to see just how hard that is. Here's another real winner of a minigame. Color the shapes. There are 4 tiers of this minigame. Color the shapes triangle, color the shapes 2, star, color the shapes 3, flowers, And color the shapes for snake. Another game where you use the mouse, and your mouse turns into a marker, and you have to color inside of the lines to color in these objects. And you have to do it in a time limit again. You have to color in the entirety of the object, but if you go outside of the lines, if even 1 pixel of your marker colors outside of the predefined line, you lose. Don't you remember the good old days of being a kindergartner, having a marker and coloring in a very basic rudimentary shape and trying to color inside the lines? Wouldn't you want to play that on your new Nintendo system, one of the 2 first-party games releasing with the Switch 2 in 2025? Doesn't that sound like fun? Wouldn't it be great if, instead of coloring in something else triangular from the Nintendo universe, say a Triforce from Zelda, instead of coloring in that, wouldn't it be better to just color in a basic plain triangle? Color the shapes to star. Instead of a superstar from Mario with, say, the superstar jingle playing as the background music for this minigame, wouldn't it be better if it was just a boring generic star that had nothing to do with anything at all and had no personality attached to it whatsoever? Color the shapes 3, flowers. You know those beautiful little flowers from Yoshi's Island? There are 5 of them in each level, and they have a little face in the middle and white petals on each side. How about instead of coloring in those flowers and changing it maybe even from marker to crayon? Imagine that, because Yoshi's Island, of course, has a very crayon-like art style. What if, again, we put no Nintendo spin on it at all, and it's just a basic, boring picture of flowers that has, again, nothing to do with anything related to Nintendo? Color the shapes for snake. You remember Rattly from one of the best games ever made, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest for the Super Nintendo, released circa 1995? That animal buddy snake that you can ride around and hop up on and use to spring to higher locations? Oh, that'd be a cool thing to color in. That'd be a nice callback to a classic beloved game. I'd have fun coloring in Rattly while some Donkey Kong Country 2 music plays in the background. Oh, no. This is just a basic-looking snake. Looks like it was drawn by a grade school kid. That level of detail and visual enticement. Oh, but it's so fun trying to trace the exact curvature of this little snake, because let me tell you, the thrill of accidentally coloring outside of the lines and getting to do it all over again, knowing, ooh, I was so close to coloring in that snake. I just gotta do it again. Now that's $10 worth of value. It's really insane to me. Now that I'm going through these again, honestly, I never wanted to boot up Switch 2 Welcome Tour again in my life, but I have it up on my screen right now just so I can refresh myself as I'm talking about it, and I am just scrolling through this list of all of the mini-games. I have played every single one, and going through all of these, it boggles the mind. This is the company that makes WarioWare. You know, that game that is all about fun mini-games? And this is what they can come up with? A college freshman who's just dabbling in very rudimentary game coding language would whip this up in a week for a class project, right? For a very basic beginner's, here's an introduction to coding. Put together some game where you move the mouse cursor to dodge objects. Like, this is Nintendo we're talking about. They should be able to put together games, mini games that are more compelling than that. Here we go. This was perhaps my least favorite one. Scrape off, stain removal. In this one, you get the absolute delight of inhabiting a cleaning person who uses a scraper to scrape crud off of a surface. And you use, once again, the mouse controls for the Joy-Con, and you're just are moving your mouse back and forth, up and down, trying to scrape all this gunk off. Some of the gunk does not come off very easily, and you have to make very short, fast movements to simulate putting in elbow grease. And it sucks. It is horrible. I can't even believe how bad this minigame is. What if you were scraping away, let's say you were inhabiting a poor janitor in the world of Splatoon who has to clean up all the ink after a turf battle, and you're scraping away ink. The actions of the minigame would still be miserable. It would still be just as unfun to actually jiggle your mouse on the Joy-Con back and forth as fast as you can with the rumble simulating how tough these little pieces of gunk are to scrape off. But at least there would be some charm and endearment to it. At least you'd be interacting with the brand that you bought this game for. Right, you're not going to buy Switch 2 Welcome Tour if you are not a Nintendo freak. This is not a game for casual Nintendo fans. This is only for people who are interested in Nintendo stuff to an unhealthy degree. And you can't give us anything to latch onto. Anything. It boggles the mind. I mean, really, the only thing that is Nintendo related in this game, outside of it obviously taking place on a Switch 2, which is very Nintendo related in that sense, but it's that Super Mario Bros. 4K tech demo I mentioned. And that's just replaying Mario 1-1 in a super tiny screen that's very hard to see and very unenjoyable to play because it strains the eyes trying to make out these tiny details. My goodness. So those are the mini games. Unbelievable. Like, it's honestly, to put this forward as something you're launching the system with that is going to really show this other side of the Switch 2, this more in-depth side with all of the cool tech power that it has, all of the hidden features. And this game in Japan is called Nintendo Switch 2: Secrets Exhibition. Now that's a name. That sounds awesome. Secrets Exhibition? Yeah, please exhibit all of your secrets to me. I want to know the secrets. I will pay $10 to get into that exclusive behind-the-scenes club to access those very exclusive secrets. Now here we get, though, to what is both the best and the worst part of Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and this is the Insights tab, it's called. Insights is really just another name for quizzes. Guess how many quizzes there are? You could be in high school, go through all 4 years of high school, take 2 classes of summer school every year you are in high school, and you would still take fewer quizzes over those 4 years of summer school than you would take in Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, because there are 50 quizzes in this game. And to take a quiz, there will be somebody standing behind a kiosk. You go talk to them. They say, oh, hey, this is you want to learn about the mouse sensor on the Switch 2 Joy-Con? And you say, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I? And then these informational panels will pop up, these signboards. You'll go read through them all. Then you go back to the person at the kiosk. They offer you a quiz to take. You take it. And in order to pass the quiz, you have to get a perfect score. You get one question wrong, sorry, take it again. Now, these quizzes are 3 to 5 questions, right? They're not hard, but it's just the whole idea, the gall. Take 50 quizzes, and you got to get a perfect score on all of them. What the heck? But I mentioned this is also the best part of the game, and this is honestly where I think this game is worth the money and the time solely for this aspect, and here's what the aspect is. Each informational panel will have details on the Switch 2 hardware, and this is where a group you almost never get to hear from in video game development, hardware engineers. This is where you get to hear from them and their thoughts, how they think through assembling this stuff. And you can just feel through the writing on these informational signboards, you can feel the thought and the creativity and the passion and the true, sincere love these hardware technicians, hardware engineers have for what they are doing. And it is so cool to get that. That is something you cannot get anywhere else, particularly from Nintendo, right? I mean, they did have the Iwata Ask equivalent, right, which I think is now called Ask a Developer, where they interviewed the hardware team behind the Switch 2. They had that interview go up. And then, of course, the three main Switch 2 hardware architects were the ones who presented the big Switch 2 blowout. So that's nice, and that kind of marks a new era of Nintendo being willing to discuss these things in more depth. But you get a whole new level and layer of specificity and insight in these quizzes that you certainly did not get from that developer interview. And again, you can't really get anywhere else. And so because of that, that is where this game's value comes through. That's supply and demand, baby. If you demand this type of information, this game is the only place that supplies it. And therefore, if that interests you at all, the $10 is more than worth it for that alone. This is something I sincerely think is awesome about this game. It is the defining characteristic. It is the one positive I will take away from it. The tech demos, like I said, they're cool, but they're very fleeting. The human emotion of this part, the human emotion of getting to hear from the hardware architects, it's just so endearing to see their passion come through. Like, it's so nerdy and dorky in a way that I have so much respect and admiration for and can relate to on such a deep level. I mean, not in a hardware tech way, because I'm very ignorant about that stuff. I'm very tech non-savvy, right? But I have that level of passion for other things related to Nintendo, and getting to hear from this group is wonderful. So here's just a random one I pulled up. One of the informational panels is called Noise Reduction for Games. And here's some of what it says. The Nintendo Switch 2 console uses a form of noise reduction that's been customized for playing games. This noise reduction doesn't focus just on spoken words. It's also designed to preserve mood and emotions. So this is talking specifically about the microphone as you're using it for game chat. The game chat will cancel out background noises, and this is talking about that. Okay, so going back to the signboard, take the sound of clapping. If you just wanted to convey words, this sound would be treated as background noise and would be reduced. However, we have balanced this so that the clapping does not go away, letting you immerse in the vibrant, positive atmosphere. It's a form of noise reduction designed for playing games. And then the final panel of each informational screen will be a pop-up fact that you'll need to remember for the quiz. So this one says, the noise reduction feature of the chip lets in not just the words, but mood and emotions too. And just knowing that these hardware technicians were thinking about, we need this chip to be able to pick up the voices in a room. They need to be understandable and clear, even if someone else is in the house in the background, vacuuming, using a blender. Those are the go-to examples they have brought up. We want to block all that out so you can just hear the voices. But what if they're having a good time? What if they're playing a game and they're just having so much fun they're clapping? Well, we don't want to filter that out, because the clapping is part of the positive vibes created through the joy of playing these games, and we want that to come through. And that's amazing to me that they thought about it in that way, and that they were smart enough to design it in a way where it can detect noises that they consider worth filtering out, but other noises like the sound of clapping, they don't filter out because it enhances the vibe and the atmosphere of the game chat. That's so freaking cool. Here's one about the magnets, the magnetic Joy-Cons. There's a gap between the Switch 2 screen and the Switch 2 Joy-Con. So this little informational board goes into that. If you look closely at where the Joy-Con 2 controller is attached to the console, you'll notice there's a very narrow gap. There's actually a very important reason for this gap. It makes it harder to detach the Joy-Con 2. Without this gap, if you tried to twist the Joy-Con 2 controllers, the principle of leverage would make it easier to detach. Even the tiniest of gaps is there for a reason. So you get so many things like that, just all these little details that you would maybe probably take for granted. It just goes into all of the insane thought that went behind every little decision they made when creating the Switch 2. Here's something that I love about the Switch 2 Pro controller, which I'll get into later in this episode. They have the smoothest sticks I've ever felt in a controller, and here's a little informational panel about it. See the control sticks on the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller? You could refer to them as, quote, smooth gliding sticks. That's because they're designed not to feel sticky or like they're snagging on anything. And on this particular page of the signboard, there's a nice little animation that plays showing inside of the Pro Controller the little knob that the stick is attached to rotating around, showing how frictionless it is. It goes on to say, also, there shouldn't be any noise when you tilt them all the way. The stick's axes have been designed to never reach the limit of their range. Instead, they stop at a certain point that you cannot see from the outside, and at the point of contact, we have placed a soft sheet. This gently cushions the area and makes it quieter. All of this helps them glide pretty smoothly! ! I love it. There are 50 quizzes, and each of them have 3 to 5 signboards, so if you multiply the amount of signboards in this game, there are hundreds. And again, my favorite part of the game, but the way they are conveyed is so boring. And here is the comparison point my mind couldn't help but go to. Clubhouse Games, 51 worldwide classics. Another Nintendo first-party joint with kind of a similar aesthetic. This very modern, white, minimalistic color scheme, abstracted visual language. In that game, there are 51 games, of course, all of them classics worldwide. But at the beginning of each one of those games, you get 2 little figures talking to each other, explaining the rules of the game, and it's fully voiced. Okay, if you can shell out for voice acting for frickin' Clubhouse Games, why can you not have a more engaging way to present this information in Switch 2 Welcome Tour? Why are these panels just silent text on a white screen that's not very interesting to look at? You have to internalize the voice as it's being written. You don't get to hear it delivered in an interesting or effective way. It just feels so cheap, and the information would be so much more sticky if they just gave some attention to the presentation and how this information is conveyed. This information that, again, is the best part of this game by far. You couldn't have stand-in characters to represent the designers kind of talking back and forth about this. You couldn't think of anything to make this stuff more memorable, to give it more love and care. It boggles the mind. I mean, sure, maybe that would have jacked up the price. All of that voice acting jacked up the price from $9.99 to $14.99. Ooh. This is something you are releasing with your flagship product that is supposed to last 5 to 10 years. It's going to be available for the life of the system. People are going to be dipping in and out of this thing over the years to learn about the Switch 2 secrets. And so many people, I think, are just going to bounce off of this so hard because it is not engaging or compelling in any way. And it's such a shame. It is such a shame. This game has no excuse to be like this. The only excuse it has is that it's $9.99. I mean, you're getting what you pay for here, right? But I would have much rather this have been $20 and had Nintendo theming for the minigames, a more engaging presentation for the text that you're reading to take these quizzes on. And then there's another little, I hesitate to call it gameplay element, but there's a lost and found system in this game where if you're walking through the museum, you will sometimes find an article of clothing or like a hat, a pair of glasses, whatever, on the ground. You pick it up, you go back to the left Joy-Con informational desk where you start, and you drop it off at the lost and found. And after, I want to say 8 to 10 of these things, you finish. And I thought, okay, maybe these will be little accessories that I can put on my character. Maybe I can wear these little sunglasses or change my shirt based on what's in the lost and found. Nope. You return all of them. Your big reward is you get a pat on the back for being a good citizen. Thank you for helping with the lost and found. And then you get a little sticker on your map. And don't get me wrong, I really love the idea of this just being there to encourage good social behavior. Just to say, hey, it's nice to be a good person just for the sake of it. If you find something, you can take it to the lost and found because maybe somebody did lose it and they want to find it. That's a very nice thing in theory. It's a nice message to convey. But again, the gameplay side of it is so pointless. The gameplay side of it is just nothing. You're running and clicking A again on a spot on the map and then warping to another spot on the map to click A again to talk to someone who will then tell you to find another thing. And after you do that, they just tell you, thanks for helping. Here's a stamp that you can see if you pull up your map screen. What the heck, man? I can't with this game. It's such a bummer. It is such a bummer. Such a bummer that let's not spend any more time on it. That is Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which, like I said, gets a 4.5 out of 10 from the Nutcase. A final thing to discuss with this. This might be my hottest take of all. All these people, okay, all these buffoons. Heck, even I was one of these buffoons, because I'm pretty sure on this very podcast, I buffoonishly said I agreed with this hive mind sentiment that this should have been free. $10, are you kidding me? This should have been a pack-in game, of course. Obviously. Have you seen Astrobot on the PS5? Not Game of the Year Astrobot that came out last year, but Astro's Playroom, is that what it was called? Whatever the free Astrobot thing was that came with the PlayStation 5. That was free. They're giving you a game as good as Astrobot for free, but Nintendo's going to charge $10 for an instruction manual. So anti-consumer. Can you believe the greed of Nintendo? Yeah, they're a greedy company. They have some anti-consumer things. This is not one of them. This should absolutely not not be a free included pack-in game. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, yes, there is $10 worth of effort put into this game at least. The $10 of value is there if you find anything that I mentioned interesting enough, the tech demos or the insights that you get from reading these signboards that go into all these nitty-gritty details of just every possible conceivable component of the Switch 2. If any of that appeals to you, yeah, you're going to get your $10 worth. You might be disappointed. It could have been a lot better, but it's still worth $10. But the much bigger issue is when you have a free pack-in game with a system, that game defines the system. It's a mission statement for the system that literally every single customer who buys your system will be able to experience, right? And I'm sure not literally 100% of the people will play the pack-in game, right? I'm sure there are some weirdos who never fired up Astrobot on the PS5. There gotta be, just statistically, there gotta be some freaks who bought a Wii and never once played Wii Sports. Of course, Wii Sports, only a pack-in game in North America, but you get my point. You do not want Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour to be the game that defines the impression for all of these people who are buying your system. You do not want this game to be something that everyone who buys the system will play, will form an opinion on, will connect to their expectations of the system. God forbid. If Switch 2 Welcome Tour is the mission statement that is meant to summarize the type of generation we're in for with the Switch 2, this generation would be dire. I'd want out of this generation right now. Now, of course, that is not what this game is. This is not a mission statement meant to be something for everyone. But that's exactly why it should not be a pack-in, right? Wii Sports is the perfect platonic ideal of the philosophy of the Wii. Anyone who buys a Wii should play Wii Sports because it is so representative of what the Wii is. That is what the system is all about. Similar to Astrobot, right? It is colorful, charming, so much craftsmanship, so many little delightful elements that anyone, young, old, no matter the demographic, hardcore, casual, anyone who buys a PS5 will get utterly charmed by Astrobot. Switch 2 Welcome Tour is for maybe 5 to 10% of the people who will buy the Switch 2. It is hyper niche. Okay? It is one of the nichest Nintendo first-party games they have ever made. Hands down. I cannot think of a single Nintendo game that is more niche than this one. Honestly, I feel a little ashamed for succumbing to that hive mind mentality. It was just in the water, man. Like, no matter who you listen to, what you read online, even now, I have heard plenty of podcasts talk about this game from people now who have played through all of it. And I still have not heard a single person back up and say, no, wait a minute, this would have been a horrible pack-in game. This would have been a horrible thing to give to everyone for free, because it would not set the tone you want. It would not interest many of these people. It would turn a lot of people off. People would be like, wait, this is what the system's all about? This is the type of thing I'm in for? So to me, it comes down to this thing either should be as it is for $10 or should not exist at all. And if you want to say it should not exist at all, that you sure, that's up to you, but it's not harming anyone. You're not forced to buy or think about or play this game. If it doesn't interest you, move on. Move on. Just like we should be. Moving on. There was something else I was really banging the drum about. No, this will be good too. This thing that everybody is making fun of, says a big waste of time. Who would want that? Wow, can't believe, I'm going to give it away here. Can't believe people are excited about Nintendo finally including voice chat in their system. Hello, welcome to 2005. Ugh. Game chat is great. Game chat works even better than I expected. It is by far the best implementation of any voice chat in any video game system I have played. It is so seamless. It is so fantastic that you do not need a separate headset. It is great that the sound quality is clear and crisp, even when the Switch is in a completely different part of the room, tilted at a weird angle. When there's background noise, all of that gets canceled out. I've only done game chat a few times, but each time there were zero problems with the quality of the audio, with hearing people. There were zero hurdles other than the very first time, the initial setup. You have to input your phone number and get a code texted or connect it to your Nintendo account, something like that. That was a little odd because I was trying to jump into game chat with someone and I had this setup process that kind of caught me off guard. Once it's all set up, it's beyond simple to jump in, and it's great that you can see the other person's gameplay screen. And it's in a very small window. You can adjust the size. There are two different size options for the person you're game chatting with to see their game screen. So you can have it a little bigger, you can have it a little smaller, or you can just not have it at all. You can game chat without the other person's screen showing if you don't want any of that real estate taken up. But it was super fun, and there's just games now, big live service games. The things some of these games have, Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, PUBG. Do people still play PUBG? Probably. One of the reasons all of these games are so popular is because of the social hangout aspect. It's a place where people congregate to hang out with their friends. It's something to do, a virtual world to play in while you're hanging out and chatting with your buds. And the fact that that feature is now system level, can work with any game that anybody is playing, even if they're not playing the same game, if they're not playing together. You can be hanging out no matter what you're doing on the Switch too. It's wonderful. Of course, you got to have friends or family members for this to make sense, and if you don't have those things, I understand why this would seem like a pointless feature. But when you have people to talk to, it works so well, and, you know, this would have been much better for me back in college, late high school, when I was playing online games more with people. This would have really, I would have gotten a ton of use out of it. But even now, the little use I have gotten out of it, it's been fantastic. And I know when it comes to the next Animal Crossing game, the next Splatoon game, Game Chat is going to be a game changer. And from the Game Chat feature itself, we will segue right onto the Game Chat camera for a cool $55, US price, of course. First impression of this thing, it's small but sturdy. Heavier in the hand than I expected. Feels rather premium, actually. So first impressions were good, and honestly, it does work as advertised. It's just a little cumbersome because when I first set it up, I was playing docked mode, of course. My dock is on a shelf next to the TV, so naturally I plugged in the camera and had it on that same shelf because there's a little cord that attaches to the top of the tablet. Went back to sit in my chair, and it was too far away to reach my level of satisfaction for the video quality I was looking for.
partially too because the shelf is low, so the camera was tilted up, so it was this like bottom up angle view of me sitting down as opposed to more of a clear-cut straight view of my face. I don't know what I was expecting, right? Nintendo developers are wizards, but they cannot change the physical properties of reality and spatial relations. So what I ended up doing was getting a separate table to drag the dock. The dock was still attached to the TV, naturally. So I stretched out that cord as far as it could, put it on another table, then got a second little table closer than that to stretch the camera from the Switch 2 dock next to put it on top of, so it would have a real close view of my face. Not going to do that process again, but I was just trying to get a feel for how it worked and how it looked. And yeah, it works as advertised, right? It's the further away it is, the worse the image quality is going to be, but it's not a deal breaker. And it does have several visual modes you can do. Of course, you can just have your plain blank gameplay screen if you don't have the camera. You can have that blank or showing your gameplay. You don't have to show it if you're playing one of those dirty, naughty games that the eShop is constantly filled to the brim with, at least on the Switch 1. You can have it so the video feed doesn't show anything from your game, but just the camera shows everything that it sees, so it's the whole room, right? Or you can have it so the camera crops out you, whether it's your face or your whole body, and then superimposes it across the background of the gameplay from whatever you are playing. And that was my preferred look, my preferred way to go about it. I felt like a real streamer over here. Hey, kids. Get this $55 camera, you'll feel like a real Twitch streamer too. It was a neat effect. There are different size options you can have. You can have the game chat screens a little smaller or a little bigger, or completely absent, you know, if you don't care about the camera and you're just doing voice chat and you want all that screen real estate for yourself, you greedy little grumpkin. But the camera was cool enough. You can also zoom in. It'll have a little circle on the screen once you have it hooked up and you're getting it all calibrated. It has a circle for your face, and you can manually zoom in with a controller, right? So you don't have to be right next to it manually moving the camera itself. You can just move the cursor and have the camera zoom to whatever part you want. Now, of course, you might still need to manually adjust the camera if you want a different angle or what have you. Again, it wasn't too mind-blowing, and I'm not going to get a ton of use out of it for Mario Kart at least, but Animal Crossing especially. Whenever Animal Crossing arrives, I think that camera is going to skyrocket in value. Not literally. Still be $55 probably, but the desirability and use case for that camera will be much higher once a game like Animal Crossing is out. For now, it is a cool little accessory that I'm definitely not going to keep plugged in. It's nice to have if you're breaking it out for a bespoke gaming session with friends. It does have a privacy filter, a privacy screen, which is nice. You know, naively, I would say, out of all of the video game developers / hardware companies, which I guess I'm just including Sony, Microsoft, and Valve, and I guess Facebook and stuff too, if you want to include their VR headsets. Out of all the manufacturers, Nintendo is the one I'd be least concerned with spying on me through a camera. But the fact that they have this privacy screen included right from the start, and even in Switch 2 Welcome Tour, they talk about how when the privacy screen is closed, it interferes with some circuit, so the camera physically cannot even be activated when the privacy screen is closed. I already didn't think you were going to spy on me, but you're making it really clear that you take privacy seriously in a way that almost would raise more red flags if I had a lower opinion of Nintendo, right? It's like, this "I promise my camera isn't spying on you" shirt has people asking me a lot of questions already answered by my shirt. That type of thing. They're trying so hard to convince you, no, we promise we're not spying on you. A more cynical person could take a little more suspicious read. But again, Nintendo is not the company that operates on that type of data exchange, right? Their financial incentive isn't nearly as high as that sort of stuff as it is for these other companies. So yeah, it's a nice feature for an accessory that is worth it if you have a use case for it
works just fine. If not, you're really not missing out on much. Jumping from the, let's call it serviceable performance and functionality of the Switch 2 camera, we have the crown jewel in the Switch 2 pile of new accessories. No surprise to me, no surprise to anyone who had one of these things during the Switch 1 era, the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller. Now that's a masterpiece, okay? Mario Odyssey, a masterpiece of software design. Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller, a masterpiece of ergonomic, comfortable, premium quality controller design. And that's no exaggeration. I am already more than comfortable saying it is my favorite controller I have ever used. I already felt that way mostly about the Switch 1 Pro controller. This is an improvement in just about every single aspect. Wow, where do I even begin with this thing? I've heard a lot of people say the Switch 1 Pro controller and now the Switch 2 Pro controller melts into your hands. Well, I can't speak to other people's experiences, but for me, my hands melt into it. I become one with the Switch 2 Pro controller. I am the smooth gliding sticks. I am the premium, seamless matte finish. I am the sturdy, bulky, hefty, ergonomic powerhouse tour de force, which allows me to manipulate every pixel within my realm of control with the utmost precision, hindered only by user error and lack of high-speed hand-eye coordination, the likes of which no human could reach, because the precision level is just that high. I am the newly added game chat button. I am the wonderfully silent yet tactilely clicky GLGR paddles on the left and right grip. And I am the soft sounding buttons being depressed into the crevices of the controller ever so gently while registering the inputs ever so correctly. The only thing you can levy against this thing really is that the D-pad is still a bit too squishy and loose for hardcore D-pad play. I've seen various reports about this. Some people say it's much better than the Switch 1 Pro controller. Some people are very dissatisfied with the D-pad still. I definitely recognize that it is an improvement over the Switch 1 Pro controller. But honestly, I'm one of these weirdos who enjoys the separated button D-pad equivalent on the Joy-Con, and the Pro controller is great for the vast majority of modern games. If I'm playing a retro game, though, I will just break off the Joy-Cons and use my left thumb on that D-pad equivalent, or I will use one of my many retro controllers that I get suckered into buying time after time, like my NES controller, my Super Nintendo controller, my N64 controller, now my GameCube controller, all for the Nintendo Switch. So I am at no shortage of quality D-pad options if need be, and in a pinch, I mean, as long as I'm not doing complex Hadouken, half-circle, quarter-moon inputs on a D-pad for an old Street Fighter game or what have you, for most games, I'm sure the D-pad would play just fine. In my limited testing, it has worked just fine, but it's still not quite as firm and solid and secure as I would like. But that is literally the only blemish I can levy against this masterpiece of a controller, just as I can levy a couple blemishes against Super Mario Odyssey, such as some of the moves have special accelerated versions that can only be done with movement shaking of the Joy-Con or Pro controller. That sucks. Get mandatory motion out of my games. The fact that Mario Odyssey is one of my favorite games ever, despite having a control scheme with limitations that can only be surpassed with motion controls, speaks to the quality of the rest of the game, because boy do I hate forced motion, but boy do I love the Switch 2 Pro controller. $85 well spent. I wasn't joking when I talked about that smooth stick glide. I don't know what sort of voodoo sorcery they are using, but these are the smoothest gliding sticks I have ever felt on a controller. This thing is the perfect weight, the perfect heft, the perfect shape.
The only other little issue, if you want to call it that, and I don't want to call it that, despite being the one who called it just that just now, sometimes I'm gripping a little too tight. I'm getting a little too invested in whatever game I'm playing, and that tight grip clicks one of the paddles, which for me, I have been assigning left paddle to the screenshot button, a total game changer if you like to chronicle your Switch journey through screenshots, as I do, because previously you'd have to take your thumb off of the left stick, move it to the capture button, and press it. And sometimes you are using your left thumb on the left stick during the moment you want to capture via screenshot. Doesn't work very well. Here, what an improvement. Seriously, it is a small but mighty difference. And so I have the screenshot button mapped. You map it on a per game basis. I don't even think there's the option to map it system-wide, which is a bit odd, because I would like to map the left paddle to the screenshot button for every game, but it's no big deal doing it on a game-by-game basis, and the right paddle reserved for whatever particular functionality I want to use it for. The battery life is nuts, just like with the Switch 1 Pro controller. It makes the 14-minute battery life of the PS5's DualSense look like an absolute joke and not a funny one. But there's also nothing funny about how serious a piece of tech this Pro controller is. I believe it's $85 in the United States for a Pro controller. It is $95 for an extra pair of Joy-Con 2. Do not ever get an extra pair of Joy-Con 2 if you do not yet have a Pro controller. It is $10 cheaper and way more than 10 times better. And I'm not even a Joy-Con hater, but the Switch 2 Pro controller is just that good. Honestly, if I could only choose one or the other, Switch 2 Pro controller or Mario Kart World, I'm sorry, Mario Kart, but you're one game. The Switch 2 controller is for every game. It is going to be a delight playing Bonanza on this thing. It was great playing Odyssey on it. Anything with any sort of finagling required of your 3D movement, this thing is really going to shine through. But for even the most rudimentary of tasks, again, sans any super complex D-pad inputs, this thing is going to be your best friend, your best companion. This is going to be your main squeeze, the Switch 2 Pro controller, which came in handy specifically for the next topic I'm going to segue into right now, the GameCube games. In particular, mapping it to the Switch Online menu screen for F-Zero GX, which normally requires a tap of the minus button to pull up, which again requires you taking your left thumb off of the left stick, and when you're playing something as fast-paced as F-Zero GX, that ain't gonna work very well if you're save scumming through the whole gosh dang game, as I did. Which is okay. I knew going into it that this game was hard as nails. I had played F-Zero GX one time before at a friend's house all the way back in 2004, I believe. I tried what is essentially the tutorial mission in the story mode. I blew up. I derailed. I did not make it. I got frustrated and I gave up immediately. Back then, that was my first brush with F-Zero as well. And now I have come to love the series specifically based on that Super Nintendo game, which I think is fantastic. And the reputation of F-Zero GX precedes itself, right? You can't go more than a few posts on any sort of Nintendo forum without running into one of these fellow nutcases who are nutty, not necessarily for Nintendo, but for the high-speed, futuristic racing action of F-Zero GX in particular. People adore this game. It is clearly more for the hardcore player, and not hardcore in a general sense. It is for the hardcore racing fan. I am not a hardcore racing fan, but you might have picked up on the fact that I am a bit of a hardcore Nintendo fan. And anytime there is a prominent gap in my Nintendo experience, such as a beloved first-party game that I have not actually gotten around to playing for myself, there are very few of those left. from Nintendo's history, but F-Zero GX was one of them. So I was determined to get through the story mode, play it to completion. I consider that a tour through the content. And this is how it's set up. Oddly enough, the first story mission, I believe, is unlocked, but after that you have to use tickets to buy additional story chapters. And you earn tickets either through completing story mode missions or through playing the Grand Prix mode. There are 4 cups in the Grand Prix, each cup with 5 different races. 3 cups to start with, the 4th cup needing to be unlocked. 3 difficulty levels on the Grand Prix to start with as well, and the beginner difficulty, I think it might even be called Novice, is so brutal. Novice Grand Prix in F-Zero GX is harder than 200cc Grand Prix in Mario Kart or Mirror Mode. I mean, it's not even comparable. By the end of my time with F-Zero GX, after I had played through all of these Grand Prix a few times and gone through the entire story, of course, with hefty amounts of save scumming, which I feel no shame about. By the end of that experience, I believe I could get through the first 2 Grand Prix on the novice difficulty successfully. I'm pretty sure I'd be able to do that without crashing out. I'm not sure I'd be able to get first, but I'd at least be able to complete them without my car blowing up, flying off the course. Probably could beat them even without getting in the bottom half. But that's after everything I learned from playing this game. Starting off, it is insanely hard, particularly if you aren't used to this style of fast-paced game. Here is a little detail that's being discussed online. Apparently, there is some input lag on the GameCube Switch Online app, and in addition to this input lag, the way the control sticks are calibrated for the GameCube app on the Nintendo Switch 2, they do not map perfectly one-to-one with how the control sticks were calibrated on the original version of F-Zero GX, and this is true even if you are using the new wireless GameCube controller. This is just from things I've read online, some video comparisons I've seen. Obviously nothing I could detect on my own, because I don't have the context of this game. Even if I had played it back then, I'm not going to remember the exact control stick calibration feel from a game I played almost 20 years ago. But I can imagine that accounting for, 10 to 15% variability with maybe how it should be controlling. Perhaps I'd do ever so slightly better if that stuff was ironed out. That said, none of it impacted my experience in a negative way. I did not even notice the input lag, which makes me a very bad gamer boy. In fact, the only way I did notice it was by booting up the Wind Waker and just scrolling through the opening menu, and there's a bit of a delay when you're scrolling down the different files you can choose from. You can definitely notice it there, but it didn't hamper my enjoyment or play style of F-Zero GX at all. So I just, did a combination of 20% get good, 80% save scum, and honestly, I had a really good time with this game. It is way too hard for me to play the way it is intended. It is not going to be one of my all-time favorites. I may go back to it here and there just to pop into some Grand Prix mode races, but it's not one that I'm going to become one of these hardcore obsessed fans over. However, I had a great time going through it, and I'm extremely glad I got to see it, and I'm extremely glad for the save state feature, because without that, I just would have not seen the majority of this game, and I'm glad that I have that experience now. Removing the discussion of the difficulty from the equation here, the actual speed of the game, the reason I'm sure so many people love it is because you can get into such a fantastically tense flow state with the insane speed of these races, these tight hairpin turns, the way the hovering machine glides through the courses, taking these curves, these hairpin angles that you might have to do various drifting techniques to maneuver without bumping into the sides. Any side of the course you bump into is going to lose you momentum, lose you time, and in a game like this might even lose you the race. So when you're in that zone, even if I could only maintain that zone for 5 to 10 seconds at a time, I eventually got up to 20, 30 seconds at a time, before needing to create another save state to have any chance of beating both the Grand Prix and the story missions. Those moments of flow state are almost unparalleled. The sense of speed is exhilarating. The sense of triumph when you're taking these hairpin turns and not losing your momentum by bumping into the walls is rewarding and fulfilling. And if you actually can manage to pull off first by the hair of your nose in one of these really tight, crazy races, it feels like a monumental achievement. I guess this is what the Dark Souls fans are always clamoring on about. That sense of gratifying mastery when you overcome a challenge so difficult and you overcome it with nothing but your raw skill and dozens of save states feels really good. So nothing but respect for this game. It is funny to see how early 2000s it is. The menu UI, it's a series of screens that you can choose the different options from. You have your Grand Prix, you have your time trials, you have your story mode, you have your options, you have your shop. And it's got this really attitude-y soundtrack with wailing electric guitars and this edgy bad boy feel that they're going for with the soundtrack and the cinematics, the cutscenes. It's got this very grimy, gritty look. It feels very bizarre seen from a first-party Nintendo game. The story itself is utter nonsense. It reminds me of something like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where no matter what your problems are, no matter what the complex issue, interpersonal or otherwise, that needs to be solved, you resolve it with, in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a card battle, in F-Zero GX, it's a high-speed death race above the cities in a flying hovercraft that goes way too fast for its own good. Despite playing every story mission, watching all of the cutscenes carefully, I really had no clue what was going on, and I didn't care. It was fun to see from a charming early 2000s, this is what game designers thought captivating, cool cutscenes were at the time sort of way. I don't think the cutscenes are good by any stretch, but they didn't bother me. Like I said, they charmed me because of the era and because I guess I'm a millennial boomer who is just a sucker for that stuff. But you're not coming to this for the story, of course. The challenges in some of the story missions themselves are interesting enough. There's one where you're racing your boy, Samurai Goro, and it's just the two of you on this canyon-esque track with boulders flying everywhere, and you must beat him without getting crushed by a boulder in the process. Boulders that are much more easily avoidable with the use of save states. There's another mission where you're rescuing this woman from a building that's about to explode, and you have 50 seconds. You pick her up in the cutscene. She gets in the Blue Falcon, and you have 50 seconds to escape. You have to speed through this winding tunnel with a series of closing gates that are closing on different sides of the tunnel. Left, right, up, down. It's more of a cylinder. 360 degrees of options for this gate to be closing and popping back up in. And you have to make these really tight squeezes through these gates before hitting a ramp and blasting off as it explodes at the last second, very action movie style. And the final mission of the game, there are 9 story missions total. The final mission is just a time trial race, basically. There's some story context around it, but it's basically beating a staff time trial ghost, and if you beat that, you beat the final mission. I'm not a fan of how the missions are unlocked. Like I said, you have to buy them from the shop, so each time you beat a mission, the next one becomes available to purchase, and most of the time, the tickets you earn from the story mission you just did is not enough to purchase the next story mission, so it's kind of an artificial way to encourage jumping back and forth between the story mode and the Grand Prix mode. I believe you can also earn tickets in time trial mode if you defeat the aforementioned staff ghosts. I'm not a time trial guy, so I didn't mess with that. But I did have fun going through the Grand Prix multiple times. I did every cup on Novice and every cup on Standard, and then I did a couple more cups on Standard. And so it was 8, maybe 10 Grand Prix total in conjunction with the tickets I got from story mode. I think that was enough to get all of the story chapters, plus a few unlockable characters, which you also buy with tickets, one of whom is James McCloud, Fox McCloud's father, who appears as a ghost at the end of Star Fox 64 if you meet a certain set of specific requirements and go through a very specific pathway of levels through the game. Despite being a big fan of lore, I really haven't looked into this. Is this meant to be an Easter egg? According to mutecity.org/wiki/James_McCloud, James McCloud is the leader of the Flight Squad Galaxy Dogs. He is 32 and has had his combat plane converted into an F-Zero machine in order to compete in the Grand Prix. During peacetime, there is very little work available, so McCloud has entered his second race in an attempt to take home the big prize money. He is motivated to become the new champion, now get this, by thoughts of his wife and his young son, both of whom need his support. Young son, I wonder who that could be. Oh no, here we have it. No fun allowed, no lore connectivity allowed, because according again to mutecity.org, quote, his appearance is startlingly similar to a character of the same name from Star Fox. Even his vehicle has a similar appearance to an R-Wing. He is the leader of the Space Patrol unit Galaxy Dogs, which is a parody of Star Fox. But according to Nintendo Power, quote, it's just one of the fun things the developers decided to put into F-Zero GX. They also stated, quote, as similar in looks as they are, Fox and James McCloud don't have any connection. What? I guess they mean Fox McCloud from Star Fox and James McCloud from F-Zero don't have any connection? Because Fox McCloud from Star Fox and James McCloud from Star Fox absolutely have a connection. The father-son connection. Very weird. Maybe James McCloud is such a legend that this guy is cosplaying, right? He's taking inspiration from the mythology of James McCloud, styling his whole F-Zero racer persona around this fabled hero he has never met and never will meet. Well, anyway, I bought that character because of the Star Fox connection. Even though it turns out there is no Star Fox connection, I have been tricked. I want my tickets back. Felt good to roll credits on F-Zero GX. Games like this, once I have beat them, if I have played from front to back, which to me is rolling credits for most of these sorts of games, I have this sense of satisfaction, right? Another gap filled, another knowledge hole plugged. Put that one more title on my Nintendo resume, and feels good to finally know what people were talking about. Interesting that it was a launch title with the Switch 2 alongside Mario Kart, two Nintendo first-party racers with a third first-party Nintendo racer, Kirby Air Riders, coming out this very same year. With another one of the launch games being Fast Fusion, which is very similar in style to F-Zero, of course not made by Nintendo. It's kind of a lot of overlap in these sorts of racing games, but I'm not complaining, particularly because now we get to move on to the second of two GameCube games I will be talking about. And no, it is not what is probably the best game that has released on the Switch 2 since the Switch 2 has come out, which is The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. I have played that so many times, and I was not really itching to replay it on the Switch 2 just yet, but I did play through the story mode of SouCalibur II. A game that is maybe perhaps more obsessed with magical, mystical swords than any other game I've ever played. But the first thing that strikes me about this, of course, is the attitude it tries to convey. It's so similar to F-Zero. It has this quasi-mature but sort of try-hard, edgelordy type of vibe. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just funny and charming, again, in the modern context. And at the time, I remember thinking, yeah, this is cool. This is different. Never seen Link in a game like this before, which, of course, is how I got sucked into it back in the day. Not much of a fighting game aficionado myself, apart from Smash Brothers. That is just to say that SouCalibur II would have never been on my radar if not for the rather brilliant marketing / gameplay deals that Namco made, Namco, the developers of this game, made with the various platform holders,
PlayStation, Xbox, and GameCube each got their own special guest character. Nobody really cares about the PlayStation 2 or Xbox characters. What, Xbox got Spawn? Todd McFarlane's Spawn? That's not even a video game character. And of course, PlayStation got Heihachi from Tekken. It's not a first-party PlayStation character, the way Link is. GameCube had a huge advantage in this category. Funny enough, Heihachi would come home to roost in a Nintendo fighting game with Smash Bros. Ultimate, one of my least hyped guest characters. Lots of respect for fighting games, but just not my genre, so I didn't have much attachment to Heihachi, but Heihachi, at least it's better than friggin' Minecraft Steve. Ooh. Still get shudders that he's in there cluttering up the otherwise immaculately beautiful character select screen of Smash Bros. Ultimate. I remember the two characters I was just like, please keep them away from Smash Bros. At all cost, were Minecraft Steve, and the only other character who I thought had a chance that would have been even worse, Fortnite Guy. And that's neither here nor there. That's just me being a boomer. These new games, these damn kids, you should like the old stuff. You should like the stuff that I like. Get this Minecraft Steve out of here. Okay, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. But I'm here, you're there, so let's get back to talking about SouCalibur II. I think a lot of us Nintendo boys and girls played this game specifically because of Link, and I'm really glad that I did, because I never would have checked this out otherwise, and it is a great game. It is extremely fun. It's pretty approachable and accessible. It's somewhere between on the scale of fighting games. It's definitely not as pick-up-and-play friendly, super casual as Super Smash Bros. Can be, but it is not nearly as hardcore or complex to wrap your head around all of the mechanics as something like a Street Fighter or a Tekken or a Mortal Kombat. I loved this game at the time, but I have not replayed it since, so I was super eager 22 years later to revisit this thing. I was delighted with how well it held up. Any game from this era, the thing that is going to make it fun to play in modern times is if the gameplay is, in fact, timeless and stands up to modern sensibilities. SouCalibur II absolutely does. It's one-on-one battles, couple minutes on the clock, on the timer, health bars that deplete pretty quickly. It's not some long drawn-out slog, and it's usually best 2 out of 3. It takes place on a quasi-3D field. I mean, it's a 3D game, but it's not just a simple left-to-right 2D plane. It is a 3D environment, but the two characters are bound to each other like magnets, like the moon and the waves. So no matter where you are walking in this 3D map, you are constantly facing your opponent. You have your heavy attack, your light attack, your kick attack, your grab attack, and you can do variations on these attacks by pressing the corresponding buttons in conjunction with tilting a direction on the control stick, very Smash Brothers-esque. And depending on your position relative to your opponent, the attack and animation will also change. So if you're doing a grab from the front, it will be different than if you do a grab, the same button combination, from the back, behind the character. Same thing with the side, and there are a bunch of different variations thereof, but again, you don't have to remember a ton of complicated controls because there are a handful of buttons, and then to do these variations, it's just dependent on where you are in relation to your opponent and the direction you're pressing on the stick. So this is where it's definitely still has a learning curve, and the characters are different enough to where the broad skills apply across every character, but if you want to really finesse it and get to know the ins and outs, as with any fighting game, you're going to need to spend time with your main, and of course, whose main is not going to be Link, especially for the purposes of playing it on the Switch 2 GameCube app for a type of service where people are likely to just dip in and out, maybe play a few hours. That's probably generous for the amount of time most people spend with these streaming games, with this buffet style of classic games that are available on these apps. So I'd imagine Link's right there on the cover art. The SouCalibur II game on the app is right next to the Wind Waker. You got Zelda Fever.
you're already playing Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom in 4K 60 FPS with HDR. Man, you just need a little more Zelda in your life. Who doesn't? You're going to hop on over, you're going to choose Link, and you are going to be delighted because his moveset is awesome. He's super fun to control. He's pretty powerful and beginner-friendly relative to these other characters. His moves are easy to pull off, and another mechanic of this game, in order to win, you either get your opponent's health bar all the way down, you lop all the green off that bar till there's nothing but an empty red line of loneliness, defeat, and despair. But you can also ring out by knocking your opponent off of the stage, and Link has a few attacks, in particular this attack that you perform with the throw button combo, where you grab the other character's arm, you twist it around, you spin behind their back, and you swing your sword like a baseball bat and whack them, and they will fly off in the direction that you hit them from. And if you're close enough to the edge, you can just ring them out pretty easily, which comes in handy in the story mode, which I will get to, because some of these story mode missions have certain modifiers that are kind of difficult to win in the more traditional, just get your opponent's health down to zero sort of way. But with Link, you can get ring outs all the time. And it doesn't feel cheap, right? It feels satisfying because these battles can have a really fast pace back and forth, which alleviates a lot of the frustration, right? It's not this long, drawn out duel to the death. It's not nearly as long as even a Smash Brothers match, right? And because it goes by so quickly, you don't have a ton of time to get frustrated, even if you're getting your butt whooped. And the tide of the battle can turn pretty quickly if you get on a roll, land a couple of moves that open you up for better attacks, better combos, puts your opponent off guard. Of course, this is just me playing against the CPU. I have no interest in playing this competitively at all. I mean, I'd play it casually, local multiplayer, that sounds fun. But just playing the CPUs, it's a very nice time because the hits are chunky, it's very satisfying, that they feel visceral, the way the attacks connect, and the way the characters will collapse or fall or get knocked back. It just has a very good game feel. Because the matches are so bite-sized, the story mode, which is called Weapon Master, the Weapon Master mode does not wear out its welcome the way it would if these battles were longer, because Weapon Master mode is just a series of modified battles where, for example, maybe normal attacks don't do very much damage, but if you knock someone against the walls or down on the ground, the damage from bouncing off of those surfaces is tripled, quadrupled, whatever it is, and it will do massive damage. Sometimes you have a stricter time limit. Sometimes your health is automatically depleting the whole fight. Sometimes your block is disabled. The thing that is more interesting about Weapon Master mode, there are these various chapters, and on each chapter there are just different icons on the map, little squares that represent different battles you have to do, and there is this really BS nonsense story, loosely tying it all together about some quest for a magical sword, a magical holy sword, the SouCalibur, to defeat the magical evil sword, the Soul Edge. There are all these location names and character names. It's all jumbled nonsense to the point where I was skipping through all of these. They're not even cutscenes. It's like a text crawl on a screen with paragraphs of text for each chapter. And I'm going through this story mode as Link. It's like, what in the heck is he doing in this universe? It makes no sense for this character to be on this random quest to get this holy sword, but you're unlocking stuff along the way. These different little matches throughout these chapters is how you unlock different characters. You can unlock a new weapon for a character or a new outfit. And there's also a shop where you can buy these additional weapons. And I mainly focused on buying the extra optional weapons for Link, which includes some nice fan service, right? You got the big Goron sword, you've got the Cane of Burna from A Link to the Past, you have the Mirror Shield, and all of these weapons have some sort of pro/con. For example, the big Goron sword does more damage,
but I believe Link is slower to swing it. I shouldn't even get super into the mechanics here because this was not some thorough walk through every mechanic where I was closely analyzing all of the details, right? This is just a whirlwind of, Switch 2 is here. I have a bunch of games to play, some of them old, some of them new. I just want to experience it all in this glorious several-week binge of gaming ecstasy. Ecstasy is a strong word, but it was a nice, fun gaming time. The trade-offs are fine, but the animations for these different weapons are the same from what I could tell, which kind of cheapens it a little bit, right? It just looks like a model swap for your weapon. And like I said, there are some differences in the effect, but the effects are it's not changing the gameplay style. It's not like each weapon gives you a completely different moveset. And even though we're all main and Link over here, you might find another few characters you latch onto. For me, it's my boy, the ghostly pale demon pirate man, Cervantes, who uses 2 stubby little buccaneer swords, and you can get some cool variations of those. It's really great to have this Weapon Master mode to feel like you have progressed through everything the game really wants to show you, gotten kind of the full experience out of it. And when you beat Weapon Master mode, plot twist, it doubles in size, and then you can go back to the beginning and do all of these worlds again, but do extra levels from these worlds. And if you do all of that, you unlock the secret final character, the Lizard Man, who's fun because he looks kind of like a Lizalfos from the Zelda series. So I remember when I unlocked him back in the good old high school days, I was matching up Lizard Man and Link all the time. You know, doing my little headcanon. Oh, here is big bad Link fighting this random scrub enemy. Isn't that high stakes? Not really, but Lizard Man is fun to play as. And all of the characters are cool in their own way. A lot of the designs are early 2000s edgy, particularly Ivy, the scantily clad, short-haired woman who has a whip. But then you also have Nightmare, the big chonky evil Nightman, who is the wielder of the Soul Edge, the evil sword. And I think, for the most part, no matter who you're choosing, you're going to have a good time. Last thing I got to talk about with this game is its obsession with swords. I wish I loved Nintendo as much as this game loves swords. And I'm not talking about just characters using swords, okay? I'm talking about the very concept of swords, as illustrated in part by some of these lines the narrator will say before a battle starts. The Almighty Ones have granted you a sword to cut your own path. Entrust your noble soul in your sword.
A hero desires a sword, and a sword desires truth.
A sword desires truth. Really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, this game could flip your whole worldview upside down if you let it. So illuminating it is on the whole concept, the whole Platonic ideal of a sword and what a sword is and how the Almighty Ones may grant you a sword because the Almighty Ones know if they want to bestow some sort of divine blessing, that would take the shape and form of a sword. A sword so trustworthy that you can entrust your noble soul to the sword. Give your soul over to the sword, but in a good way, because your soul is noble and the sword is trustworthy. Because you see, a hero desires a sword, and a sword desires truth. I think the world would be a much better place if we all lived by that philosophy. A sword desires truth. Well, we're wrapped up in the concept of truth here. Let me tell you the real truth about the Nintendo Switch 2. It's a massive cover-up. The truth is being hidden everywhere but here. There's been a lot of bluster the past 8 years over Nintendo losing its personality when it comes to operating systems, menus, and the little touches that they would have. For example, the eShop music on the Wii, on the Wii U, missing from the Switch. The little gift icons, when you would download a game from the 3DS digitally, it would appear on your screen as a present, and you would have to click the icon of the present, watch a short little animation of the present unwrapping, and then you can see your game. Very cute little touch, no doubt about it. I am more than okay with them prioritizing performance over cute little touches when it comes to something as integral as the operating system. But the Switch 2 facing similar criticisms. However, there is a 15 to 20% increase in personality with the operating system. A lot of that coming down to the sounds. The Switch 2 makes a delightful little sound when it starts up. Boop, 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 boop. You can disable it in the menus, but it's not loud, it doesn't take a long time, and it's pleasant. I mean, it's no GameCube operating system sound, which you can activate on the Switch Online app if you hold the control stick. If you hold the left control stick in any direction after you press A on the GameCube app, before the app loads, hold the left control stick in a direction and you will get that sweet GameCube boot up sequence. And that's where the real fun beeps and boops are coming from. And then the menu sounds are softer. They are lowered in the mix. When you're clicking on games, when you're closing out of games, really in particular when you're taking a screenshot in a game, the camera snap sound is much lower than it was on the Switch, because that thing, on the Switch 1, that sound would overpower every other sound effect in the game, to the point where it made a game feel like you're playing Pokemon Snap, right? Like, it's one of the main mechanics, and that's why it's mixed so loudly, because you're taking pictures, and it's maybe just my broken brain that would go to Pokemon Snap for a half a millisecond every time I would take a screenshot on the Switch 1. And yeah, you could disable the sound effect in the options, but where's the fun in that? I am pleased to report, though, on the Switch 2, the mix has been evened out. All of the menu sound effects are present, but less prominent in a way that just lets them subtly fade into the background where they belong. And I appreciate that. It's these little things, these little details that have gone into the Switch 2, where at first glance, sure, it's just a bigger, better Switch 1. You get into the nitty-gritty, there are some delightful little surprises Nintendo has left just for you and just for me. Now let's get to the hardware itself. Let's get to that hand feel with all of that metal and plastic rubbing across the skin of your greasy palms. Hopefully not too greasy, though. Wash your hands before you touch your Switch. Should be included in every health class curriculum. Picking this thing up, this is one sexy rectangle. I'm just going to say it. I'm not sure I've ever seen a rectangle more sexy than the Switch 2. It feels premium. You're holding luxury, particularly compared to the Switch 1. I thought the feel of the Switch 1 was fine. No complaints. But going back to it now, it does feel like a children's toy compared to the Switch 2, in a similar way to how the Wii U tablet felt like a children's toy, really from the day it came out, but especially when compared to the Switch 1. You hold the Switch 1 in your hands, the Wii U tablet feels way more like a Mattel toy made of cheap plastic and materials, and the Switch 1 didn't feel like that, but compared to the Switch 2, it kind of does, which is, again, not meant to speak ill of the Switch 1, but instead meant to speak extremely highly of the Switch 2. I mean, heck, this thing feels like $450 in your hand. Why would you want $450 in cash when you could transform that into this sexy rectangle that you can hold and caress, that'll last you for many years, that'll be your partner in crime, probably last you more than a pet, depending on the pet you get. Get a pet and a Switch 2 on the same day. Smart money is on the Switch 2 lasting a little longer than the pet. You know, and I promise you a pet's going to cost more than $450 over the lifetime of the pet. And then when that sad day comes, maybe there will be a new Nintendogs and Cats game from Nintendo to ease your pain, and you can get out of the world of real-world companionship with actual living beings, human or animal, and you can offload all those needs to the digital realm. Nothing could go wrong with that approach, I promise. So you're holding this sexy rectangle, and you get to fiddling. You get to pressing all the little buttons moving over all the little crevices, the little nooks and crannies to see what's hidden inside, what it can and can't do. And more likely than not, one of the first things you're going to land on is the magnetic Joy-Cons. And if you thought the snap sound was nice on the Switch 1, snapping those Joy-Cons into place, sliding them down the rail, you are going to love the snap, the powerful magnetic snap of the Switch 2. Honestly been one of my favorite things about how the hardware feels, because this actually is the part of the Switch that feels most like a toy. It feels almost like a premium fidget spinner in the sense that you can just snap these Joy-Cons off of the Switch and then reattach them, and the way you click the buttons and pull them off, feel the magnetic force as you're detaching them, and then the just delightfully satisfying click and snap into place when you reattach them, and the fact that these have been designed for longevity, right? Unlike the rails on the Switch 1 that you slide the Joy-Cons into that are prone to degrade and break over time. Magnets are forever, baby. That's what they say, right? Diamonds are for a little while, but magnets are forever. Not that I'd recommend just snapping these on and off all day long, but who am I to stop you? Like I said at the top of the show, I'm not your dad or the cops. You want to snap these Joy-Cons off and on the Switch 2 all day long instead of actually playing a game? I say more power to you. And if you want more information on the magnetic Joy-Con, boy oh boy does Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour have some quizzes for you. Now there's been some consternation about the screen. The screen has been causing quite a stir, and this is because primarily the screen is a downgrade from the Switch 1 OLED model, while still being an upgrade from the OG Switch 1 screen. Now, a few non-OLED problems have surfaced, such as very slight ghosting, because the refresh speed of the screen can't keep up with what's being processed. I don't know. I don't know how it works, because the screen has a 120 frame refresh rate. So I don't really know how this blurring of the image, this ghosting effect happens, but if you look really closely at certain games, primarily side-scrolling 2D ones, and if you look really hard, you might be able to see a smear of ghosting here and there. Not something that's going to bother me. And I will say, too, while I primarily play docked mode, I've been playing a lot more handheld mode on this thing. So I have been getting more of the screen experience. And yeah, it's not as vibrant and colorful as the OLED, but it's much more vibrant and colorful than the OG Switch screen and every other Nintendo handheld screen I've been using my entire life. The OLED screen on the Switch 1 is the best Nintendo has made, but the Switch 2 screen is the second best, and it's no contest. So for someone who has been used to playing the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the DS, the 3DS for many, many, many years of my life, and then the Switch 1 after that, yeah, I'm okay with the quality of the Switch 2 screen. And I can't fault them for it either. To me, it's important to analyze and criticize the thing you are critiquing for what it is and not what you wish it were. And for something like the Switch 2, you have to account, at least for me, I have to account for the very obvious logistical reality of OLED screens raising the cost of each unit they produce, meaning they would have to sell the thing at a higher price in order to offset the incurred added cost from the OLED screen. And so the trade-off is, would you rather have had this thing $485 instead of $450, but it comes with an OLED screen? Yeah, I would have. Sure, of course I would have paid that. But I certainly can't criticize the device for not having this mythical unicorn screen that can satisfy all of the demands. It can't both be OLED and be at the price point Nintendo wanted it to be at, where they thought they could make enough money off of it but still have it be successful in a mass market way. A way that if it does catch on and become successful and remain successful the way the Switch 1 has, is only good for us, the players, because it means it'll get more support, more games, more development, resources poured into it. And, they're going to fleece us. And I like being fleeced when it comes to new editions of consoles, special editions, or upgraded editions. Yeah, 2027 Nintendo, you can fleece me for another $500 for an OLED version of the Switch 2, preferably some special edition that ties in with Zelda or Splatoon or something of that ilk. And, the other option, if the lack of the OLED is that big of a deal to you, you just wait it out. You wait it out, it's coming. But for the market conditions that the Switch 2 is releasing in, the economic realities of how these things are assembled, the manufacturing costs, the unit costs, now the tariff stuff, of course, it's not realistic to expect an OLED screen from the Switch 2 at this point, and so therefore I'm not willing to hold that against it. Now, I think you can hold it against the screen for having that ghosting issue. That's not an unavoidable trade-off of having an LCD screen. Not every LCD screen has that, and it would have been nice if they would have shipped with screens that were higher quality. That's something I think is fair to criticize them for. Not having an OLED screen just gives me some future retail therapy to look forward to, as I once again distract myself from the void with some fine new Nintendo products. The other hot button issue for the Switch 2 hardware. The other negative lightning rod making all the waves. The battery life is terrible. It's pretty bad. I don't remember how bad the Switch 1 launch model battery life was, because they did release a hardware revision before the OLED. The only difference was the battery lasted X% longer than the launch model of the Switch 1. And I did have that version too, because that was the version that just became the default version. And when I got my second Switch, which was the special edition Animal Crossing Switch, of course it had that improved battery life. And then the Switch OLED had either the same battery life or even better. I don't quite remember, but I've seen people saying the Switch 2 launch model battery is roughly equivalent to the battery life you got out of the Switch 1 launch model. I do feel like I remember playing Breath of the Wild in bed on the Switch 1 and it lasting longer than what I've been experiencing with the Switch 2, but there's also been this bug, this software bug, where the battery indicator does not display correctly. And so the battery indicator might be showing you're almost out of power, but the Switch itself actually has more juice than what the indicator is showing. I'm sure that's not helping the perception. Again, what I come back to with this is there is no good solution for this. This is where battery technology is. This is not Nintendo just cheaping out, going with a low-quality battery. This probably is about as much as they can get out of the device with the power it's running at for the level of technology batteries are at now. That will improve. Battery tech is always improving over time. They're always making more gains or figuring out ways to reduce the consumption on the chips and tech that's already being used. That stuff just becomes more and more efficient over time. So, again, undoubtedly, when that fabled Switch 2 OLED model comes out in 2027, it's going to have a better battery life, and that will feel like another nice upgrade that makes that extra $500 worth it. There are other solutions, for this. If you're really playing on the go all the time, there are portable battery packs you can get. Lots of public places now just have outlets for you, the public, to plug in and charge your devices at. So even if you're on the go somewhere and you really got to play, 3.5 hours of Mario Kart outside of the house and you can't get to your dock or your home plug, check ahead. Call ahead. Call the restaurant. Do you take reservations? And do you have an outlet at the table so I can play video games instead of engaging in conversation with the real-world humans I'm sharing a meal with? If they say, no, we don't have outlets at our booths or tables, sir and or ma'am, then you know not to give that restaurant your business. Because the real business is playing video games. I think the fact that those are the two biggest complaints people are having about the Switch 2, the screen quality and the battery life. If you had told me a year ago the Switch 2 would come out and the main takeaway on a hardware level was everyone would be happy with just about every aspect of it other than the tablet screen quality because it's worse than the OLED but still better than the Switch 1, and the battery life because it only lasts 2 to 3 hours because that's just where battery tech is, I'd say that's just about the best case scenario I could have hoped for. Within reason, right? It's easy to come up with some fantastical wish list of the ultimate perfect device that would never really exist in the planet we all live on. Earth, I think it's called? I'll have to fact check that one for sure. But everything else about the Switch 2 feels so nice. I just love it. And the last thing I want to touch on, I mean, there are so many little things like the 3D audio, right? The improved speaker quality, the way the game cart slot is much easier to take the flap off of to get those carts in and out of. The microphone on the Switch that is perfect for game chat. The ability to run at 4K, all of this stuff. I'm super happy with all of it. The thing that has surprised me the most, though, in a positive way, is the kickstand. This thing rules. Because now I am playing tabletop mode. And I'll just play it in bed. I'll have a pillow either if I'm sitting up in bed, a pillow in front of me, or if I'm laying in bed, I'll have a pillow on my chest, like a real man, okay? And I will have the kickstand out. I will have it balanced on the pillow in a way that the original Switch or even the OLED model, which had a much improved kickstand from the Switch 1 version, still not stable enough for my liking. But the Switch 2, that thing I can get real stable, real quick on non-even surfaces. And you just snap those magnetic Joy-Con off, you're gaming in bed like nobody's business. And then if I'm playing in bed that long anyway, it's either time to go to sleep by the time the battery is running out, or it's time to get up and do something with my life. That something sometimes being just taking it to the living room, transitioning to the dock, and continuing to play on the TV instead. The last thing about this, I guess I should have included this in the 2 criticism phase, because there is one more criticism, not quite as vocal, not quite as much of a lightning rod as the screen and battery life. The ergonomics of the thing, it's a bit top-heavy, it's a bit unwieldy, not super comfortable to hold in the hand for long periods of time. But if you pop the kickstand out at about 40 degrees and you slide, I guess this would depend on your hand size, right? But for me, I slide my pinky finger underneath the ridges beneath the kickstand that is popped out at that 40-degree angle. That supports the Switch, while I have, of course, my thumbs on the sticks and the buttons, and then I can use my pointer or middle fingers to reach the L and R, ZL and ZR buttons. It's super comfortable that way. The Switch 2 kickstand works great for tabletop mode and also handheld mode. So, like I said, one of my biggest surprises of this sexy little rectangle. So, for the Switch hardware, I give it an I love it out of 10. Cruising in to our final game on this Switch 2 launch Whirlwind, not welcome, tour. We have Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma. Animal Crossing was my first life sim game all the way back on the GameCube. And then shortly after that, I branched off into Harvest Moon, which then developed a side series called Rune Factory. Been around since the DS days. I had the first one, of course, farm sim with a mix of fantasy JRPG elements. But the first one didn't click with me. And then I sat out of the series until 4 on the 3DS. And let me tell you, Rune Factory 4 is my second favorite life sim ever, second to only the original GameCube Animal Crossing. And I think you could also make an argument for New Leaf, Animal Crossing New Leaf on the 3DS. If you want to say that one is also just as good. Those are the top 3, okay? These are the top 3 life sims as I see it. Animal Crossing GameCube, Animal Crossing 3DS, and Rune Factory 4. Stardew Valley does not make the cut, but Rune Factory 4 is an exceptional game. The way all of these mechanics overlap and build and intertwine with each other, it has created the most satisfying gameplay loop in a life sim I have played. Now, the anime fantasy aesthetic and tropes are certainly not for everyone. Sometimes they are not even for me, but, you know, you can put up with that if everything else is so exceptional. Yeah, it's not that I dislike these fantasy anime games. It's just, it's not my favorite. It's not my preferred style if I got to choose. but I don't find it off-putting the way I'm sure some people do. But if you can get past that, Rune Factory 4, which was re-released on the Switch as Rune Factory 4 Special, is an absolutely fantastic game. Of course, looks a bit dated, even on the Switch 1, because it is an up-res of a 3DS game. I've been all in on the Rune Factory series since 4. The studio was shuttered or seemed like it was going bankrupt. There was a period of a few years there after 4 where it seemed like Rune Factory was good and dead, and we would never get another game. And then through some miracle of the business world, the team and the series got resurrected. Rune Factory 5 came out on the Switch a few years ago. It's an okay game. It's pretty decent, but it's definitely not great, and it's nowhere near as great as Rune Factory 4. So this is the next one since then. This is the second Rune Factory game since 4, and it is more of a spin-off game in that a lot of the farming mechanics have been de-emphasized in a way that does increase your quality of life options while reducing the tedium and monotony, but it also trades off by losing that particular flavor that you can only get from the way some of these tasks are performed in farm sim games. And at the cost of a few other things too. It's a really interesting one from someone from my perspective who loved 4, indifferent towards slightly positive on 5, now very much looking forward to 6, which will hopefully be a return to the more classic traditional style of farm sim mechanics. But Guardians of Azuma sits in this really interesting spot, in particular too, because this was my other launch title, right? I mean, okay, my third. I had 3 games in particular I was really gung-ho about at the launch of the Switch 2, Mario Kart, Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and Rune Factory. So I will always associate this game with the launch of the Switch 2. I have now beaten this game. I will probably not go back to this game, but I have some thoughts on this game. Now stop me if you've heard this one before. You play as an attractive anime protagonist with amnesia who has divine powers, who is closely associated with an ancient dragon god. Now, in this one, the big twist is that your character is not the dragon, his or herself, but merely hangs out with the dragon, who has taken the form of a cute little woolly, a sheep-like creature that provides plenty of comedic relief. So it's you and your little woolly pal, this woolly who is actually a big, tough, ancient dragon god, and you get sent down to this world in turmoil. You start off in a village that has been struggling because the evil dragon god, the counterpart to your good dragon god, has been corrupting the land with blight, and it is preventing the crops from growing and preventing the villages from flourishing, and they've been beseeching the gods, please come down, please save us, and who should appear but an anime protagonist with amnesia who is secretly the divine power that they were interceding for, who can solve all of their problems and restore the land to its full bountiful beauty. It's a fine setup. I'm into the premise for the context of what I'm doing in the game. It allows for some grand, sweeping, mythological aspects to come into play, while also giving the developers an excuse to give your character powers you wouldn't have if you were just playing as a normal boy or girl in the farming world. And they use this to some effect. You get these divine treasures throughout the game, and each one you can activate with the X button when you have it equipped, and they will do slightly different things. There are parts of the land that are covered in blight, but there will be different types of blight that can only be addressed with a particular divine relic. So there will be these plants of blight that you have to take out. One you cut with a fiery sword to burn it down. Another one is spewing toxic gas, and you have to press the X button to send a whirlwind to fan away the poison and dissipate the plant. So really it kind of all boils down to going up to the blight and pressing the X button, and the result is the same regardless of what sacred treasure you need equipped. Press X on the right type of blight with the right type of weapon, and the blight goes away. But there are some combat applications
There are skill trees for each of these divine weapons where they each have a couple of unique special moves, and one of them, the aforementioned fan, for example, when you have that equipped, you will sprint faster. But a lot of it is just for the flourish and the flavor, right? The gameplay mechanical differences between all of these items are not so vast that it feels like some dramatic shakeup to the gameplay with each new one you get. But it does allow for a simple and satisfying enough sense of progression, collecting these treasures one by one and then earning skill points as you use them to then go into the skill tree and upgrade their attack power, their attack capabilities. And these divine treasures are given to you by fellow gods, fellow spirits of nature and otherwise. And I mentioned you start off in one village. That's the Spring Village, and it's spring there all the time. And there are 3 other villages you quickly unlock and can travel between, each one perpetually stuck in a season. So each one of these villages has an associated god or goddess that oversees that particular season. So you got the goddess of spring, the goddess of summer, the god of autumn, and the god of winter. And there are a couple more surprise gods and goddesses after that. And this is where the game breaks down for me and loses me a little bit, because one of the joys of life sim games is the passage of time, the turning of the seasons, and the sense of progression as your life evolves and unfolds with these characters and with these tasks, with this farming empire that you are building up. And when you have access to all seasons at all times, when you're traveling between these villages almost every day in-game, it just loses all sense of time progression, because you're never waiting for the next season to hit, because you're already playing in that season in one of the 4 villages that you kind of need to prioritize equally. You know, there is essentially an equal amount to do in each of them, and you unlock all 4 of them pretty quickly. It's not like, oh, you spend a lot of time in the Spring Village first, and then you unlock the Summer Village, and then you're just going to stay in the Summer Village for a long time before moving on to the Autumnal Village. You're bouncing back and forth between these places with an alarming degree of frequency. Because you are playing someone that is adjacent to the divine, you feel like you are part of the divine, and you're almost outside of time with how you're able to travel between all of these locations so freely and manipulate the land, clear it of the blight. And then, of course, the other thing that your godly powers can do is you become the town leader, and the villagers respect you so much that you can order them around. You recruit villagers, not named characters with story or dialogue, but just generic, no-name NPCs will congregate at your village. They will start moving into your village as you level your village up, and more slots for villagers to stay in become available, and then you can assign these villagers to do all the work for you. You don't want to plant, water, or harvest your crops? You don't want to take care of your pets? You don't want to milk your cows? That's fine. You just make some random villager do it for you. And so the process of micromanaging your daily tasks shifts from being the one who physically goes and waters the squares, plucks the plants, pets the sheep, cuts the wool, manually deposits all of these things in the shipping box. You can kind of set it and forget it by changing these villagers, assigning them to different tasks. And of course it does scale, right? The more farmland you want to have up and running, the more villagers you need assigned to farm-related tasks. And I'm sure you can min-max this with your spread of villagers and their spread of different roles, right? You also have to assign villagers to shops. When you get to the Summer Village for the first time, there are a bunch of shops, but most of them are abandoned, and you can't shop at them unless you assign a villager to the shop. But you also need villagers to do other things, and there are more shops than there are villagers you are willing to spare for shopping-related purposes. So there's some light decision-making there, but really all of the town development stuff turned into this set-it-and-forget-it thing, which made me detached from the town-building elements. I didn't really get invested in how these towns were progressing, in part, too, because you have these crazy customization options. Each village will have what's called a development zone, and these zones are where you can plant your crops or put new buildings or put paths and decorations, right? Plenty of parts of each village are locked into place with their design, and you can't alter them in any way, but there will be these big patches of land that you unlock more of in each village. As you progress through the village level up system, you'll unlock more of these plots of lands that you can customize. But unless you want to do this just to make it a very aesthetically pleasing town, which I wanted to do in Animal Crossing New Horizons, right? Spent hundreds of hours on this island. I had a vested interest in the island, its residents, how it was developing, and it was my island. There's a sense of pride and ownership you can take, a sense of individuality you are compelled to express with a game like that is not present in Rune Factory. Because again, I have very little attachment to these 4 different villages because I'm ping-ponging back and forth between them so much. And so it all became very perfunctory, right? Early on, you need to craft a blacksmith building, put it in your town, and you can forge, buy, and upgrade weapons. Pretty useful for the combat section of the game. But instead of thinking it would make this town very quaint and cozy if I put this blacksmith over here, if I put the building here next to this section of the town where I'm already doing my shopping, however you want to think through it, it's more like, oh, I need a blacksmith, I'll plop it down in the middle of this field, I'll go buy my weapons, I'm going to unlock more land later, there's no way this will be the final place I would want my blacksmith to be if I were designing this from the start as some sort of town I want to build up over time. It's like, no, if I want to actually make it aesthetically pleasing, I kind of need to wait till the end when I've unlocked all the different zones and I can tell where I want each place to go, each building, each section of farmland. And by the time you get to that point, you're done with the game, right? You've practically beaten the game. What's your incentive to go and customize it all? Unless, again, you're just very into the aesthetic and you have this sense of long-term investment and attachment to these villages, which I know some players do. I totally get that. For me, it just didn't line up and was a real bummer. This was the part that disappointed me the most about the game by far, because with all of the non-story and non-social elements, I felt like I was just disengaged with them and using them as a means to an end, fuel to progress the story, taking the shortest shortcuts to get things up and running, to get what I needed, as opposed to really building these villages out in a way that felt organic and the way I would play if I had only one village to worry about, or I was in charge of manually tilling all the fields, all the barns. And I think when you have too much freedom, my biggest issue with Animal Crossing New Horizons, many detractors of that game feel the same, there aren't enough boundaries. The freedom is too limitless. It paralyzes the choices you can make. It overwhelms the senses with the scale and options. And in Animal Crossing New Horizons specifically, it's kind of slow going, rearranging things and trying things out, getting things set up the way you want them. So if you do change your mind and decide, oh yeah, I just developed this section of my island, I'm happy with how it looks, but I kind of want to experiment with some other sort of design ideas, it's just too cumbersome to redo all of that. I felt similarly here, right? It's much easier and quicker to set everything up. You can go into mouse mode even with an overhead grid when you're laying out these plots of land in town you can develop. So it's very easy to just drag and click and line things up. But I much prefer games where, okay, you want a blacksmith, you have to do something to unlock the blacksmith. And then the blacksmith shop is already a pre-established location in the town. You cannot change it. You do not decide where it goes. You do not decide which way it faces. You do not add pathways to the blacksmith shop with a terrain of your choice. You're choosing a dirt path, a wooden path, a stone path, no path at all. Do you want to put lakes or moats around the blacksmith office? That's yours to control. That is not how I get invested in these games, because one more element of this stuff is I like the sense of moving into a town or a village with a pre-established identity, and if I am the god of this region that can move heaven and earth literally to my whims, if I am powerful enough to terraform the land from earth into water in the span of 0 in-game minutes because the timer, the in-game clock pauses while you're in build mode, it doesn't feel like a real place I'm actually living in.
So, quality of life trade-offs, the ability to put all of your villagers in charge, customize it the way you want, that for sure appeals to a wide variety of players based on how successful this trend has come of maximum ultimate freedom in these games, but it sure as heck doesn't appeal to me, and I hope it cycles around and eventually we get back to some more restraints when it comes to the amount of customization you can do in games like this. The main campaign itself, I had a very good time with. It's classic Rune Factory. Outside of these villages, there are big regions you can explore with monsters and different caves, and of course plenty of items to pick up to use for crafting and selling and upgrading. Most of the main missions will take place in various dungeons, where you're going to beat some boss at the end to rescue another god or goddess, or unwrap the mystery of how you got amnesia, what the big bad black dragon is actually up to. All of these things, very standard fantasy anime stuff, but executed in a way that's fun and satisfying to go through if you treat it as a campaign as opposed to this long-term life sim game you're really going to settle into for several months. Combat pretty easy, although I had a good time with it because I'm sometimes fine with just button mashing if the feel of the button mashing is slick enough and the way the weapons impact the enemies is satisfying enough. I can turn my brain off for things like that. It's not complex at all. You can unlock a perfect dodge for basically every weapon type you can equip, and so if you just dodge next to an enemy attack, it'll go into slow motion, give you a chance to just spam the Y or X button and mash and mash and mash, and then when the time speeds back up and the enemies are on you again, throwing out more attacks, you can actually just keep spamming the dodge button too, and more often than not, you will trigger it just by proximity. There's no real timing or finesse required, but I'm not looking for that from Rune Factory. I don't want some hardcore action experience. And I was playing on the hard difficulty setting for the first 3/4 of the game, because I had read online that this game was painfully easy, and I figured I wanted at least somewhat of a challenge, some resistance, and, like many games with difficulty modes that are not super well-tuned, it basically just turned most enemies into heavier damage sponges. It's not like you really have to think and strategize more about how you play when you jack the difficulty up. It's more like you're just going to spend a longer amount of time mashing the attack button to take these guys down. And I'm surprised I lasted this long, that I played it 75% of the way through, because I got to a point where it's like, why haven't I bumped this back down to normal yet? Or heck, even just story mode, like, I have kind of seen everything I need to see with the combat, especially by the end of the game. It gets pretty repetitive, and it's just a way to progress to the next cutscene or story sequence. So even though the combat didn't bother me, it did both wear thin by the end, and it also hampers the excitement and desire to really engage in the weapon crafting and upgrade system, because, the weapons you have, they get outclassed, but you can find recipes, you can buy new weapons pretty quickly and easily, and the stuff that becomes available from the shops or just the recipes that you find, it's like, you just have to have the materials to create a new version of whatever weapon class you're rocking every few hours, and that will be good enough, and you don't need to worry about really searching out the super rare weapon recipes. You don't have to worry about party composition, because you can take villagers, not the NPC villagers, but the actual named characters. You can take them with you out on your journeys, and they each have a weapon class that they use. So if you really wanted to trick everyone out with in-game weapons and armors and figure out the right synergy, okay, I want to have a bow user here and a healer here and a debuffer here, and you could do that, but even on the hardest difficulty, the difficulty does not demand any of that. And so, again, it kind of comes down to aesthetic, right? Like, this bow looks super sick, so I want that because it looks cool. And yeah, the damage numbers will be higher, but that's kind of secondary to the fact that my character looks more powerful and dangerous because the design of this bow is so cool relative to the one I had before. And that's fine, that's enough to see me through the campaign, but it's a very superficial type of engagement with those systems, and these systems do not interlock and build on each other in the same way that Rune Factory 4 does. So there are definitely some missed opportunities here. Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma comes nowhere near the majesty of Rune Factory 4, but it does look a lot better. The art style's nice. The character design is good. The characters themselves, most of them are pretty likable. There's one character in particular who you unlock later in the game. Mild spoiler alert for anyone who actually cares. There's a god of the underworld who enters the story and starts becoming one of the villagers you can hang out with later on. And he's awesome. He's this Oni god who is a real shyster. He skips out on his bar tab. He likes to get drunk a lot. He's kind of harsh with his language, says some swear words, but he's like a partying, feel-good sort of dude who just wants to have fun beneath it all, and he secretly has a heart of gold. I think that might be the tsundere archetype from anime. I'm really not sure about that, actually, but I think tsundere is when you have a prickly exterior but secretly have a heart of gold. But the character is just super fun. It was one of the most fun characters I've ever seen in a Rune Factory game, and even if that character archetype sounds rather tropey, the execution was great. Honestly, I kind of wanted to romance this guy just to see how his dialogue and bonding quests would play out, because you have, I think, 5 male and 5 female bachelor/bachelorettes you can woo and date and marry and have kids with. It's not gender locked. You can date a guy or a girl regardless of whether your character is a guy or a girl, which is great. So, of course, I was wooing the ladies at first, but then by the time I got to this guy, it's like, well, I just want to see this guy's characterization and his dialogue because it's one of the most entertaining characters of the whole game. But at that point, he comes in towards the end of the game. My bond with him, it starts at level 0. My bond with some of these other ladies who have been there since the beginning are already up to levels 7 or 8. It's like, am I really just going to grind bond levels with this dude so I can see his dialogue? It just didn't really line up. As we say here, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And I got to a point where I had done everything I wanted to besides the final quest, the final story mission, and the final boss fight. And before I did that, I wanted to get married, have a kid, see the end of these relationship options to increase the bond level. You talk to the person, and you can chat with them. There's a let's chat option, and each day you do that, their bond points go up a little, and there's also a let's hang out option, and that will give you one of 4 choices that rotate. I'm not sure how many options there are in total, but there will be 4 choices to choose from each time, and you can do one of those a day, and those can be give a gift, go eat at the Dongo house. Dongo, some sort of Japanese sweet, I guess. And eventually you unlock some more racy things like take a nap together, where it'll just cut to a little animation of the two of you flat on your back outside in the greenery, fast asleep, with several inches in between you. No hand holding, no touching, no physical contact whatsoever. Super hot. This is actually a skill tree. I mentioned the leveling up the different treasures, the different holy artifacts in the skill trees, but there is a social skill tree, and you can unlock different things to do with your romantic partner. Taking a nap is one of them. Another one is patting them on the head. And the final one that you can unlock is giving them a kiss. Giving them a big old smooch. I unlocked that. Not very tantalizing. Pretty tame. Pretty funny that this was like, this is the end game unlock for the social skill tree. You're going to be able to give them a little kiss. Something for mommy and daddy. You want to see these pixels kiss? All you got to do is spend 1,000 skill points at the end of the social skill tree, and they're going to kiss. Yeah, it was pretty underwhelming, and by the time I was kissing, I was already married to this chick. It's kind of the first chick you're introduced to just because she was the one I started leveling up first, and therefore was the furthest along by the time I got to the end game and wanted to just marry someone to see what that was like. So it was the spring goddess, who is this pink-haired woman, and she's overly curvy in a way that you might expect in a game with anime characters who are romanceable.
And she's so sweet as spring and so loving and lilting. And she's a big old drunk. She gets teased for her alcohol habits throughout the game. And when you start dating someone, you can choose a pet nickname for them from a list of options. Oh, now that we're dating, what should we call each other? You can keep it the same as what you've always been calling each other, but then you get a list of options for little pet nicknames, like, oh, dear, oh, babe, oh, my love. But each character also has a negative one that is specific to them. So I chose the pet nickname for my wife in this game. Her pet nickname was Tipsy, because she just couldn't help herself. She's just drinking all the time. When you choose the name, she says something about how, oh, I wasn't expecting you to choose something so derogatory. They comment on the fact that it's not very nice to call them by that. So then any cutscenes with us going forward, she'd be like, oh, my love, how are you doing? I'm fine, Tipsy. That level of backhanded snark. I mean, it'd be a horrible thing to do in the real world, but in the safe confines of a video game, anime, romantic relationship, you can call your divine spring goddess wife Tipsy in a mocking way that mocks her debilitating alcohol addiction, and it will be just fine. Actually, there are no negative consequences from that, from her being a drunk. I mean, she drinks heavily in some scenes. She gets teased about it, but she's never like, oh, I blacked out and I destroyed the forest. I blacked out and I forgot to give sustenance to the flowers. And they lost all their succor and they are wilting and dying. God, I need another drink. I'm going to go drink with the demon boy because he also likes to drink, and we're just going to drown our sorrows. Like there are no negative consequences. The alcoholism doesn't lead to any bad choices. It's just this like little character flaw that they let you make fun of in a way that, again, feels superficial, and that's kind of the theme of the life sim element of this game. So yeah, once I got to the end game, I'm just talking to the characters I'm interested in leveling up, giving them a gift, or hanging out with them, doing one of these activities, going right back to bed, going to the next day, doing the same thing. You finish this within like a few minutes each day, because it doesn't take very long to warp around and talk to the people you want to level up and click on the let's hang out icon and do a little activity with them. There's no interactivity in the activities. And then just right back to bed so you can refresh it for the next day, so you can get your points for that day, back to bed, do it again over and over and over. So I married this chick, and then you have a little child, a little miracle baby. I think it's 5 days after you get married, your spouse will approach you about starting a family. Aww. It's up to you. You can say, heck no, I ain't want none of them kids, I believe is the exact dialogue option. If you do choose to have a kid, though, you get a magical turnip that you plant in the backyard behind the shrine that you live in. And over the next few days, the turnip gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally, the turnip is super big, and there's a little baby inside in the turnip. That is how babies is made in the Rune Factory universe. No physical contact required. Very PG. So then the baby is born, and then immediately the kid is like 5 years old. It's like, was this a 5-year time skip? Because there's a cutscene of them being an infant, being held in your arms, and the little townspeople from the various villages are coming up and meeting the baby, and isn't this sweet? And then it cuts to a new scene, and the baby is now a 5-year-old boy or girl who can talk to you, and that is when you resume gameplay. That magic turnip baby just blossomed into a full-blown little 5-year-old boy or girl in a matter of a 3-minute span of cutscenes. The miracle of life really invokes a sense of awe and wonder that I have not felt since hearing the narrator of SouCalibur II wax poetic about swords. And that was Rune Factory. But there is one final mechanic that is new to not just Rune Factory, but new to any life sim I have ever played. Lots of life sim games with romanceable partners. You will see lots of discussion online. Who are you going to marry? Who's the one you're going to settle down with? And this will be a big decision for some people because you can only choose one, right? And if it's a game you really love, maybe you're going to replay the whole life sim game for the sole purpose of choosing a different romantic partner. Well, if you're tired of doing that, if you want to have your cake and eat it too, Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma has the answer with interdimensional adultery. After you beat the game, you can go to the Fate Weaver Shrine, which is on an island in the sky that you can fly around to on top of your dragon throughout the game. Little sky islands, sort of Tears of the Kingdom-esque in terms of the look and feel of just flying through the sky and checking out these various little islands. And one of these shrines is the Fate Weaver Shrine, where you have to go to get married. That's where the ceremony is held. And after you're married, after you've beat the game, you go back to this shrine. There's a little swirling ball of energy you can go up to. And if you click on this, it will teleport you to a different timeline where you are no longer married. All of your bonds are set back to level 4. If they were above 4, they will be set back to 4. If they were below 4, they will just stay where they are. And I believe you have to be level 8 or 9 to propose. Everything else stays the same. It's the same day on the calendar, the exact same amount of story progress. You can just time hop to this other dimension, this other timeline, and you can date and marry someone else. And then, what about your first spouse? That's okay. You can go back and visit them anytime you want. So the final thing I did in this game before turning it off and probably never returning to it, I had my kid. My kid turned 5 years old. It was such a sweet time. I'm just starting a family. I go to bed the very next morning before the wife even gets up. I hop over to another timeline. See ya. Felt like one of those open-ended conclusions to a TV show. I finished the main game. The main conclusion of the story is over. But what's the little stinger at the end that leaves it open for a sequel? I've gone to a new timeline, and the world is my oyster, and I can now cheat on my current spouse by pursuing someone else. There are a multitude of slots, so if you want to do this, go to your second timeline, get someone's rank up from 4 all the way up to 8, 9, or 10 again, and marry them, and then do it a third time, and a fourth time, and a fifth time. You can do that, and it will save your progress in all of these timelines that you can jump back and forth in between each other at will. It's hilarious in terms of the implications of the actual plot and story. It's really funny to just think about this as interdimensional adultery as a gameplay mechanic. But of course, from a game design standpoint, I actually think it's really brilliant. It's solving a problem that has long plagued the life sim genre, and you might not even call it a problem, right? You need to make decisions and live with your decisions, just like in real life. But it's a super interesting way to acknowledge the fact that lots of people want to try out multiple different marriage candidates in these games, see what it's like, but so many of them aren't willing to devote the time to an entire second playthrough. The only thing I would change, I would not reset the bonds back to level 4. You should be able to keep the bonds wherever you're at. Even if you're at level 10, a level 10 bond with your spouse in the current timeline, you should be able to go to another timeline and that character still be at level 10 bonding, just you're not married. So I don't know why they decided to do that, reset it to level 4. But if you're just sleeping and waking up and going to give your new romantic interest a gift or hang out with them, doing that, going back to bed, rinse and repeating, I'm sure you can grind their bond progress pretty quickly. That's Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma. I would certainly recommend buying Rune Factory 4S over this. But, this game has a lot of modern quality of life things and a much nicer art style. It's still a good game, not a great game, but it's a good game that I enjoyed and do not regret playing, though I am glad that I am done with it now. Whew! That's all for the hardware. That's all for the software. All we have left now are a couple of experieyi. And what's this? Special guest! Friend of the pod! Co-host of the pod, Mira the Nintendo newcomer. Are my eyes deceiving me, or are you really here joining us for the experieyi segment?
I'm really here, my dear. I'm here for a good time, not a long time, since you took most of the episode.
That's true.
I really hope you enjoy your time with it.
I enjoyed parts of recording it. Upon editing most of it, I'm a harsh mistress towards myself. But I'm sure the fine folk will at least be mildly, passably entertained while I drone on and on about 20-year-old GameCube games. Well, we're going to talk about your experieyi. of joining me for the midnight launch of the Switch 2 at the one and only Best Buy.
Yeah, it was very organized. For the anticipation of this system, I was expecting a wild crowd.
You thought it was going to get pretty rowdy?
Very.
Yeah, it was just a group of very civilized, well-behaved adults. There were a few kids there, but it was definitely not wild. It was not rowdy. I'm thinking back to 2007 when I was at GameStop for the midnight launch of Halo 3, and we were waiting outside, and I remember someone drove up in a truck with his windows down and the Halo theme blasting from his speakers, and someone else had a bunch of Game Fuel Mountain Dew branded with Halo 3 that he was passing around, and people were hooting and hollering and yelling and partying, and this was nothing like that. This was just, we're all adults here, we're very refined, we have sophisticated palates, so we will just wait calmly in line like reasonable adults for our new Nintendo system.
I couldn't believe how patient and well-behaved everyone was. I very much like that there were people who brought their games to play while waiting.
Yeah, there were a handful of people playing Switch 1 in line. I, of course, didn't bring mine.
You mean any of your 5 ones?
I did not bring any of my 5 Switch 1s. Got to keep them locked in the vault.
Besides the one, my very first Switch system that I just inherited.
Yeah, there were maybe 60 people in line outside of Best Buy. We got there a couple hours before the midnight launch. There were a couple people 2 spots in front of me who were talking about Fire Emblem Engage. I heard some shade thrown around at Fire Emblem Engage. I'd also like to put that game in the shade. Fire Emblem Engage, it's too hot for you out here in the realm where all the good video games are. Why don't you just go cool off in the shade? And we'll all forget about you. And someone will smack talk you in line for the Switch 2. That's what I overheard. Word on the street. I was in the field and I can confirm the kids are talking about how bad Fire Emblem Engage is.
You think that was bad?
The kids can't stop talking about how mildly disappointed they were with Fire Emblem Engage.
Well, I heard about something called, quote, that wheelchair game. Which, yeah, the art keeps being bland in it, I guess. Do you agree?
Do I agree?
Yeah, very bland.
That it's very
gray.
I do. Of course, you're talking about upcoming classic Drag and Drive, which recently got its release date announced, coming out in August, and the price. Guess how much this bad boy is going to cost?
I'm very bad with money.
That's true. Well, is that true? I hope not.
Yeah, I usually like to look at the value of a game more so than the price.
I thought it was going to be a $40 game, maybe even $50. This is the same company that released 1-2 Switch for $50, and then I think later everybody 1-2 Switch for $40, and then they had the gall to release Mario Kart World for $80. So this game, that's going to be high up there. Wrong. It is double the price of Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which means it is only $19.99 for Drag and Drive.
That's very reasonable.
I guess. Apparently, we did not put any resources into this game, and it shows. Gameplay's supposed to be fun. Anyway, keep going. What did you hear? What were people in the line saying about Drag and Drive, quote, the wheelchair game?
Well, they weren't saying too much, because then they switch on to Metroid Prime.
Ooh.
Now, that's a game, I'm more of a racer than a shooter, but I would recommend it. Maybe it will be popular in Europe. In Romania, people are fond of Counter-Strike.
Oh.
But this looks nicer, more colorful, more flamboyant.
Metroid Prime 4, looks real hot. Real hot.
So I heard a bunch of games, as you know, that I'm not very familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
I liked very much observing how the games were tied to the actual experiences of people, in the way that it was intriguing to hear names mentioned for the sake of joy. Because while I do feel very appreciative of your diligence in compiling lists.
Well, thank you very much.
You are mastering categorizing like nobody else I've seen.
That would be my clinical OCD hard at work.
I was hearing mostly about memories, like people spending their New Year's Eve playing games of a certain kind. And it made me realize that, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, if I'm going to pick a game, like a recommendation, I don't know if I necessarily rely on an overall reception of the game, like which game would be number one on a list, but based on how much a game seems to be enjoyable. And maybe you think different as a Nutcase than I do, but I think of a game whether it's memorable or not necessarily if it's ranking this or that place on my list.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I love ranking things, but not to the exclusion of other games, right? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games that I have played that are not ranked in my top 100, for example. And that doesn't mean that I don't think highly of many of them. It's just different categories. You're right, though. There is something infectious about hearing people themselves speak passionately about the games that they love. And I'm online a lot. That's how I consume most of my video game discussions, but getting out there in the real world, fellow flesh and blood humans, hearing them talk about that in an exciting moment like the Switch 2 launch, put some pep in my step, you could say. Because, of course, I understood what people were talking about, and the gentleman standing right in front of me, a few years older than me, but we got to talking, and we started going way back. He was talking about his beginnings during the NES days, and I was talking about mine during the Super Nintendo days. And he started bringing up how now he is raising his kids on Nintendo, and it was very heartwarming. And, gee, he has a 10 or so year old son, and he was telling me about all these hardcore roguelikes that the son was playing on the Switch. I don't remember specifically which ones, but it was like Enter the Gungeon, Binding of Isaac, that tier of hardcore roguelike that you would not expect a 10-year-old to be playing. And not just playing, he was saying his kid has beaten these games, or at least completed runs in these games, which is extremely hard to do. So yeah, this guy is raising some real hardcore fans over there. And it's just the people you meet, the people you get to talk to, see, hang out, and the excitement just palpable in the air.
Yeah, I couldn't help but also notice the generational continuity, because you had seasoned gamers, very easy, like very passionate. It's always great to witness how passionate people are about games. Like their taste matured over decades, but the fact that they brought their children into this passion just proves that games transcend time and connect across generations. And you could see also how proud they were talking about how their child defeated the boss king in a record time.
I'd be proud too. Are you kidding me? And there are plenty of media properties that can transcend generations, and I'm not as well versed in all of these other fandoms, of course, but there is something special to me and many people about Nintendo specifically with how they can connect to the child in us all. And for people like me who have been lucky enough to play since we were children, carrying that into adulthood and seeing it passed on to future generations, for me it's not just a, hey, like what I like, you dumb little snot-nosed punk. I'm the Nutcase. You want to be a Nutcase too, don't you? Don't you?
I guess I do.
No, these children absolutely should not become nutcases like me. It's not about that. It's the inner satisfaction that I get from knowing, hey, this kid is on a path that I was on, a path that has brought me so much joy, and I just hope that these kids, this next generation, whenever I hear about young gamers getting into Nintendo for the first time, or excited about the Switch 2, maybe they've played Switch 1 for a few years, and this is their first new video game launch system that they've been excited about. It just makes me happy for them, and I hope that they get even half as much out of it as I do. Now, if I hear about a kid playing Minecraft or Roblox or Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, I don't care about that. Those kids can go sit in a pool and wait for mommy to scoop them out once they're all pruned up for all I care. But the Nintendo kids, Those are the kids who need protected. Protect the Nintendo children at all costs. Now, it's just great. It was great to see that transcendent of generational lines, like you said. And speaking of the line, I assumed foolishly, I suppose, time makes a fool of us all, and time sure made a fool of me. I assumed most of these people had pre-orders. But I guess normal people who do have a pre-order figure, well, I already have mine reserved. Why would I go stand in line for 2 hours? I did that so I wouldn't have to wait in line. Whereas I'm like, let's do it all. Let's get multiple pre-orders. Let's still wait in line. Because when the doors open, they had this system, and people without pre-orders were in one line, and people with pre-orders, they brought them to a separate line, a parallel line, and there were maybe 20 or so people with pre-orders, and so more than twice as many folks had no pre-order, and they were just hopping in line to get one on launch day, and they all walked out no problem with the Switch 2, whereas I and many other people like myself, with our particular proclivities and paranoia, just stressing out, oh, we need not just one pre-order, we need at least 2 pre-orders from different places to diversify, and we still have to wait in line, and we're still panicked we're not going to get one. And then all these schmucks, these Joe Schmoes, waltzing up, oh, new Switch, yeah, I guess I'll stand in line and get one. Oh, yeah, I got one, yeah, no big deal. Ugh, what am I doing with my life?
I guess not playing roulette whether you're gonna get the Switch 2 or not.
That's right. I take no chances. No chances. It was great, though, that everybody got to get one. They were doing 5 at a time from each line. So 5 people with pre-orders and 5 people without pre-orders were all in there at the same time. And it was a very smooth system. It was not chaotic at all. I really liked the idea of only a certain amount of people being in the store at once. It was not pandemonium. I did, however, run into a bit of a panic attack moment. It turned out you could only pick up your Switch if you were signed into your Best Buy account and had a specific barcode pulled up that they emailed to you in conjunction with your pre-order. Okay, and I was not aware this was how they were going to do it. I, of course, had all my Best Buy emails. I went through them all. I could not find the right one. The person I was talking to in front of me told me what to search for. He's like, oh yeah, my email, this is what the title of it was. So I searched for that. I found that email, logged into my account, but the barcode was not there. It said, preparing your pre-order for pickup tomorrow. Whereas on his, that page just said, your pre-order is ready. And there was a barcode. And I start to freak out. I was like, my barcode isn't active. Excuse me. Hello. Somebody help. Somebody help. I'm freaking out over here. Hello. I wasn't actually saying this. I was playing it cool. Whew, there's still a way out of this yet. But inside, my heart was, am I going to have to come back here at 10 a.m. tomorrow to get my Switch 2? No. I pity the fools who would have to suffer me coming in at 10 a.m. And by that, I just mean I'd be the only fool who would suffer because I'd be the one worked up in a tizzy over nothing. But I couldn't get it to work. Thankfully, some guy did a backdoor deal. And by that, I mean an employee just rang me up an alternate way, which apparently they could have been doing this whole time. But instead, they tell everyone, no, this is the only way. You have to pull it up on your smartphone, get the barcode scanned. And because I got it scanned in this backdoor way, I did not get the collectible Best Buy / Nintendo Switch 2 commemorative midnight launch coin. A big metallic coin. On one side, it just was red with the Nintendo Switch 2 logo. On the other side, I believe it's yellow with the Best Buy logo. Now, thankfully, I have no interest in this coin because half of it is Best Buy branded. So I did not feel bad at all about not getting this coin. But I was thinking back on some of these previous novelty coins, like Super Mario Odyssey came with a collectible coin. Super Mario Galaxy on the Wii, I got a collectible coin from the Breath of the Wild. I believe there was some sort of collectible coin component. All these coins.
That's a lot of playful currency you got.
That's true. Playful currency that does not spend anywhere.
So I only paid with the price of your patience, no coin.
Not even my patience. It was my sanity. It was that 2-minute internal freak out where I'm just convincing myself that this isn't going to work out. Because when something like this happens, I like to try to convince myself that the bad option is occurring so I can get over the disappointment faster. And then when it doesn't happen, I can have a big wave of relief. It's really not pleasant. I wouldn't recommend that method. That's just how my brain chooses to operate. Again, though, I am emotionally well-adjusted, as you can clearly tell from this podcast. No one's more emotionally stable than the Nutcase, let me tell you. So, I mean, yeah, obviously, I'm not freaking out in the store. I'm just being chill in line like everyone else. But wave of panic. But the wave of relief, when I saw my little boxes being brought out, I was so excited. I was so shocked at how tiny everything looked. That's the Switch 2 box. It looks so small. That's the box for the camera. It looks so tiny. But we got it in the bag, and I was just taking it all in as I was walking out, looking around the crowd, trying to enjoy it, knowing that these midnight launches are super rare. Who knows if they'll ever do another one? And thankful that I got to experience it with you, with all the fellow Nintendo fans there, and it was for something I was so excited about. It went off without a hitch, and then I got to come home and spend my 4-day weekend just binging on the Switch 2. That 4-day weekend kind of has turned into a 4-week month end. What else do you have to say about the launch experience?
For me, it was for sure one-of-a-kind event to witness, because I haven't been to any midnight launch. Actually, I haven't been to any launch of anything.
Midnight or otherwise, yeah.
I'm really curious to what would be the craziest story someone who has gotten any Nintendo console has ever been in. If you have any personal one.
There was the uprising, the near revolt that happened during the Nintendo Wii midnight launch. I stood in line for 9 hours outside of a Walmart on a very cold November day in 2006 to get the Wii. Now, I already had my pre-order at Toys R Us for that one. I had a pre-order.
Is that the one where you have snowflakes in your beard?
No, that was from when I went on my trek through the snowscaped ice city to get Princess Rosalina amiibo exclusive to Target. The things I do. But at this Wii launch, I was standing in line for 9 hours. I had a pre-order at Toys R Us, but they didn't open until 9 a.m., I believe, the next morning. Whereas Walmart, I could get it at midnight. So I had Toys R Us as a backup. I'd rather wait in line 9 hours in order to get the system 9 hours sooner. And what they did, Walmart knew how many they had. So after the line had formed, they went and they counted everybody out, gave us all a number. And then the people who didn't get a number, sorry, we don't have enough systems. If you're at this point in the line or later, you can go because we ain't got any extras for you.
That's kind of sad.
But it's a nice way to do it. It's better than waiting until midnight and then finding out.
That for sure.
You know.
I don't know because I've only been to one launch.
Well, so it seemed like it was smooth sailing. We get in after midnight. That was the other thing. They didn't let us stand in the store, even though it's a 24-hour store. They could have let us. They made us suffer for our Wii in the cold. A few people from my high school waltz in. I didn't know these people personally, but they had a reputation for being the rich kids who got away with things, right? And they waltzed in at 12:05, didn't wait in line for a gosh dang minute, came to the electronics section where we all were, said, hey, we were here yesterday as a group of 3 or 4 of them. We were here yesterday and asked about getting a Wii here tomorrow, and the guy gave us this little ticket and said, oh, yeah, you can just come back tomorrow at midnight, show him this, and you can get one. And the night manager, I'll never forget his name. His name was Kevin. Kevin had 2 options in front of him. Option 1, well, that person yesterday who told you this is an idiot. Of course you can't just do that. You had to wait in line like all of these folks. Sorry, you're out of luck. He could have said that. But instead, he honored the ticket that these rich prep boys had gotten the day before, and so the last 4 people in line who had been assured of their Wii and who had been waiting for hours, all of a sudden they were no longer able to get the Wii, and people were on behalf of these 4 people. It was this camaraderie. We had forged these bonds, standing in line in the cold for so many hours. And when we saw this grave injustice, one of my friends, he stood on one of the benches inside of the store. He started shouting this rallying cry. This is ridiculous. These people were waiting in line. If you're going to screw them like this, you need to give them a $100 gift card. He's like demanding justice and reparations for these people who had gotten screwed out of the Wii. And that was about as rowdy as it got.
Do you know what happened to those 4 people?
Yeah, they ended up getting $50 gift cards. People were not very nice to Kevin on the way out. Myself included. I mean, I didn't cuss at him or anything. I gave him a dirty look, though, and I think I just shook my head in disgust. Other people were swearing at him or flipping him off. This crowd was really into the fact that these are our people. They were in line with us. They did the thing. They should be rewarded. They shouldn't be punished for doing it the right way. And sometimes I wonder what happened to Kevin. Maybe he's listening to this podcast. Kevin, you screwed up, man. 2006, midnight launch of the Wii. Your life was on a forked path, and if you would have chosen the other one, boy, you'd be a lot happier than you are right now. Which I guess, what does that say about me if I'm assuming his life has gone so poorly he finds himself listening to my podcast? This one, Switch 2, nothing like that, right?
Right. Far from what I was expecting to.
What were you expecting?
Similar to the story you told me. I mean, mine is the people coming behind the line, but...
Just expected more...
hype. Less order.
Less order, more hype.
Disorder.
Again, though, it was just a lot of adult-age people. There were no unruly teenagers. I think that's the ingredient that was missing. No unruly teenagers there.
Well, I guess you know that adults can be unruly too, so...
They can, and sure, I could have used...
No sight of that.
I could have used some more hype and excitement, but whatever, it's fine. We got our systems, got home, and then the magic started. I remember I went to the restroom real quick, and while I did that, I had put all the boxes on the table in front of the couch. I came out from using the restroom, and the box to the Switch 2 was half open. You were opening it, probably thinking, oh, I'll just get this stuff out. And I'm like, no. Wait. I only get to open a new Nintendo console once a generation.
I was like, what is this? Christmas?
Yeah. Because I admire the packaging. I look for the details. This thing was packaged in there. Talk about minimalism. Talk about efficiency. There was no wasted space inside of this Switch 2 box. I was impressed. It was the let no part go to waste philosophy. And then we hooked it up. Setup process, super smooth, super easy. And so we thought, it's after midnight at this point. You had to work the next morning. I didn't. But, we'll play a couple of rounds of Mario Kart.
Of course I had to work. Why would I take the days off?
Yeah, whereas for me, why wouldn't I?
Or why would I go to bed?
You were asking, why would I go to bed when I could stay up until... I believe it was 4:30 a.m. we stayed up playing Mario Kart World together. What a joyous experience it was. It was just so exciting, so much fun, so much laughter and smiling and just really soaking in the first next-gen experience from Nintendo. And at this point, I'm turning off my critique brain, right? We're going to get very deep into Mario Kart World in our next episode. But for that first night, it's just, no, I just want to bask in the joy. Let me bask in the joy. I don't get a lot of joy to bask in, okay? So I'm going to take my chance when it presents itself. And I'm super glad we got to do that together. I think you were having more fun than I was. You were smiling and laughing more than me.
Well, it was hard not to.
Not to have a great time?
Not to have a great time. And not to have the day off the next day.
Yeah. You considered calling in sick the next day, but you thought better of it.
Yeah, for sure. Insanity is being sick, staying up all night, playing games, having fun.
Yep. So certainly a night to remember for both of us. That's really the only true experieyi I wanted to talk about, but there is one final thing in this experieyi section. The conversation surrounding the Switch 2 launch. Not something you've been following, I'm guessing, correct?
Correct.
It's just been this low hum of dissatisfaction with the fact that Mario Kart is the only big new game at launch. People saying, I wanted something else. I needed a big, meaty single-player experience to go with the launch. Come on, Nintendo. Why didn't you give me that? I'm bored. I've played all the Mario Kart already. Come on, Nintendo. I just dropped all this money on this system and I'm already done. Any opinions on that take?
Well, I definitely can understand the preference, but for me, I like to play with someone.
Yeah, for you, it's perfect, right? You don't care about the single-player games so much.
But I do have to admit, I'm curious. Is there any game that satisfied this urge of people to play by themselves?
A lot of people went back to older Switch 1 games or played Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom since they got those hot new upgrade patches. Of course, there were some third-party games people were playing. Like I used Rune Factory to fill my single-player void, as well as some of those GameCube games. But people are so impatient. And maybe it's because I've been around this block too many times, but I just look at this discussion and I think, you fools, you do not know how good you have it. You have no idea. For those of you who have been playing as long as me, can you think back to the droughts, the insane, we're dying in the desert. Please, Nintendo, throw us just a drop of water. Months at a time would go by in between exciting Nintendo game releases. Sometimes we would get 1 or 2 a year. And starting with the Switch 1, Nintendo figured out, hey, it's good to keep our system propelled forward with momentum. It's good to pump it up constantly and to not unload our entire arsenal in one fell blast. If Donkey Kong Bonanza had come out on the same day as Mario Kart World, guess what? You'd be done with Donkey Kong Bonanza. If Metroid Prime 4 had come out, guess what? You'd be done with Metroid Prime 4 by now, and you'd be in the exact same situation. Whereas now, we are only about 2 weeks away from what may very well be a Game of the Year contender. That's going to be exciting, and Nintendo just has this monthly drop. That's been their cadence since the Switch 1. A first-party game per month, usually. I mean, there have been a couple exceptions, but they've been remarkably consistent with that. These poor young fools. It's like, what were you planning on playing the Switch for a week and selling it? You know this is a long-term investment, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. There's no winning sometimes. Let's say they released Donkey Kong and Metroid at launch. People would finish them, and then there'd be a 3 or 4 month gap on the calendar, and they'd be complaining all over again.
Complaining is the thief of joy.
And now I'm complaining about the complainers. And now we look ahead. The world is our oyster, as they say. I don't know who's saying it, but I have a feeling someone is saying it. The world is Nick and Mira's oyster in particular. Unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of seafood.
Good thing I like oysters.
Yeah, you can have my portion of oyster and I'll just starve, I guess.
You're just getting fed by games.
I'll save up all my stomach space for all them bananas.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Can't wait.
Too bad you don't like bananas.
Yeah, it's a real shame, isn't it?
It's okay, I'll eat those too, I like them.
There you go. You can eat bananas while watching me play. So our next episode will be the conclusion of our Mario Kart Spectacular. And after that, it's freedom, baby. We're at this bottleneck where everything was kind of concentrated in the lead up to the Switch, and then the opening salvo, everybody's playing Mario Kart. Of course, everybody will be playing Donkey Kong, but the floodgates are going to open, and there are going to be so many different paths we can take now in terms of the games we discuss and cover and talk about and compare and contrast. There are still so many combinations I'm trying to figure out as to what would be fun to hear Mira talk about, see her play through some of these classic games for the first time or some of these new games. Well, this is where we would love to get your feedback. Seriously, tell my wife what to play. She's way more likely to do it if it comes from one of you than one of me. One of me than me. There is only one of me, and it's me.
Don't tell me what to do. Tell me what to play.
Tell her what to play. I'll be talking, donkey. That's going to be my game. And of course, I'm still so hyped to do the Donkey Kong Timeline episode with you, but we can do that at any point. That might not even be in the near future at this point. We can save that for a rainy day.
Am I seeing some clouds out there?
Oh, you see the rain?
Yeah.
You want to get into the timeline sooner rather than later?
Start with theory.
Theory. Well, my theory is you need to play more games on the Switch 2. Our listeners need to write in chat at switch2ludiclore.com.
How about we just go and play now?
Nothing wrong with that. Well, I suppose that's the end. Another lengthy gap in episode drops. You'll get used to it. You know, it's a surprise. You never know when a Switch 2 Ludic Lore ep will drop. Could be now, could be tomorrow, could be in a few weeks.
Just like a European vacation.
That's right. We're working on European time here, folks. That means we don't have to be holding ourselves to any sort of strict time standard, which works good for our schedules. And absence makes the heart grow fonder. Keep them waiting. Keep them wanting more. Do you folks want more? Why is my mind imagining everyone who's listening shouting verbally, no, we don't want any more? Why is that where my mind went to?
Because less is more.
Well, we have given them less this month, that is for sure. So they have all the more they could want. But we will be talking to you all again very soon for the Mario Kart Spectacular wrap-up as we cruise into Donkey Kong territory. So remember, kids, in 20 years, when you're as nostalgic for Switch 2 games as I am for GameCube games, you can think back to this very moment and realize how many years Father Time has lopped off between then and now.
Is that the wisdom you want to impart?
Uh-oh!
You should inspire the kids instead of frightening them.
Goodbye!
Write them an email.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Nintendo loves when fans email them telling them what they should do about their game release schedule. I'm sure those emails definitely don't go straight to the trash.
Or write us an email at chat@switch2.
Did you forget the rest of the email address? Oh, no. If even you can't remember it, I'll give you a hint. It's the name of the podcast. Wow.
Oof.
Whirlwind.
Oof.
For Donkey's Chunky Banana Rampage.
So please look forward to it.
Oof.